Today is Monday, September the 9th, 2013, and this is the start of an interview with Mr. Dennis Kosal at the Clinton-Macomb Public Library, 40900 Romeo Plank Road, Clinton Township, Michigan, in partnership with RSVP of Macomb. Mr. Kosal is 66 years old. He was born June the 20th, 1947. My name is Dave Brousseau, and I'll be the interviewer, and Gary Miglia will be the videographer. Mr. Kosal, would you state for the record the branch of service that you serve?
U.S. Army.
All right, Dennis, let's give a little background on your family. Are you local? Are you
Yes.
born in?
Born in Upper Michigan, not in the Thumb area. Harbor Beach, Michigan.
Harbor Beach?
Right.
You'll excuse me, I don't have anything written, so I need
That's
to
right.
keep track of some of this stuff. How big a family are you from?
I have 2 brothers and 1 sister.
Were the brothers involved in?
No.
Really? How did they get away with that?
I think my one brother's only a year younger than me. I think he had some type of deferment, but I don't know what it was for. Medical type thing. And the other one is a lot younger, so Vietnam would have probably been over with by the time he was eligible.
Lucky him. 2 brothers and
1 sister.
what does she do?
She's retired now. She was a waitress when she worked.
What did she do?
She was a waitress.
Oh. And were your mom and dad local people too?
Yes.
Did you enlist?
No.
Were you out of school?
Yes.
Um,
I graduated in '65, got drafted in '66.
Where did you graduate?
St. Clement's High School in South.
Oh, really? St. Clement's, yeah. What, were you waiting for the
Well, I knew it was
invitation?
Well, what happened is, you know, we dated through high school a lot, Chris and I.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, the draft just kept getting bigger and bigger. We knew it was around the corner. I didn't do anything to try to get a deferment. I'm not sure if you remember back then, they had deferments for different types of what you were doing. You know, some people got deferments for skilled trades, some got deferments, they went to college. I was going to college only part-time and working, and I guess I just figured it was going to happen eventually. I didn't go out of my way to get a deferment, and it was kind of funny, even the deferments kept changing. It got to the point where everybody was going to college, and then they said, okay, if you get married, you get a deferment. So then everybody ran out back then and started getting married. Then they said, okay, we can't, that's not going to work. So then you have to have a child to get a deferment. So we just proceeded with our normal lives, and so if it happens, it happens.
What, in 1966,
Right.
this was really roaring.
Right.
What'd you think about that? I mean,
did
it cross your mind that?
To be honest with you, it didn't. I don't know. I guess we just were living our normal lives and just figure if the government drafts me, that's it. I guess I didn't really think of the consequences, or I wasn't watching the news. When you're 19 years old, I mean, you're not thinking of those things.
Well,
or at least I wasn't.
Yeah, I think
we were both so wrapped up in our lives that...
And don't forget, I don't come from a military family. My dad was never in the service, and I had some uncles, but...
Well, my dad was from Canada, and he missed the first one and the second one, and living near Selfridge, it was very conscious in my mind. And a lot of the kids got deferments because they were going on to college. And I was A1, and I wasn't. And it bothered me. I was not eager to make that trip. So I did what I could to avoid it, and I joined the reserve. And the conditions under which my enlistment were, I didn't have to go active for a bit. So I was okay. But I remember it being on my mind in the papers. I was very much aware of World War II, Korea, and I didn't want to go that route. So, I mean, for some of you at that age, you're not much aware, but it's hard for me to believe anybody wasn't aware of Vietnam.
Well, I mean, I'm aware of it, but I mean...
aware of it enough that you knew if you had some choices, you would probably try to avoid it. And in my day, they were, give me a piece of that bad guy and hero stuff.
Well,
so,
I didn't look at it that way. Like I said, I think Chris brought up a good point. We just, I mean, in fact, even for our wedding, we had our wedding planned for over a year. It wasn't like, even when, if you got married, you got a deferment, we didn't go out of our way and say, well, let's get married early so we can get this. I mean, we just said...
We never even talked about it.
Yeah, I know, we never even, we just, you know...
What'd your folks think about it?
They didn't say much
They were
either.
quite
They didn't say
quiet.
anything either way.
My dad never said anything to me.
Wow.
They never
That's
mentioned.
interesting.
Yeah.
For what was going on.
It's like they just totally shut it all out, and I think we did as well. But we were so young, I think that was our big excuse. But he never tried getting out of it.
So you guys were just a year out of school or so?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So you get drafted. Where did they send you?
So Ford and Detroit to put up, when you had the
Fort
first
Wayne?
report, yeah, for first report, but I wound up
Yeah.
eventually in Fort Knox for the basic training.
Kentucky?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's common Army
Right.
post.
By train.
Yeah. Were you active in athletics or anything in high school?
No. I
What
worked
was
a
it
lot.
like in your boot training? That must have been an eye-opener.
Well, I worked a lot during, you know, I worked at a supermarket, so I was in fairly good shape compared to some people, okay? But I wasn't an athlete in high school. I went to a Catholic school which sports wasn't, you know, they didn't have the funding and everything like that. Plus I didn't have, you know, I went, I think, 1 year for football, and I lasted about 1 day, and that was it. But it was a shock, because I had long hair back then in the 60s. You had long hair. It was funny, the first day of when you had to report, some people actually came down in cars instead of, because all they had to do was report. I guess they didn't have to report to Fort Wayne, if I remember right. You just had to be in Fort Knox at a certain date. And some people came down, I don't know how they were getting down their cars, you know, it's been so long, but it was quite a shock, you know, having people yelling, you know, top yelling at you and everything.
Anything to beat you down to nothing.
Right.
So they can rebuild you in their view what they wanted from discipline. For many of us, probably the best thing that ever happened to us to get us to grow up and start off, but it's a real dehumanizing time period for a lot of us to go through, combined with being scared.
I think the people that had the worst time were, you know, I think they were drafting up to either 25 or 26 back then.
Oh, yeah.
The older guys really had the hard time with the discipline, because
Yeah, that already
they
started.
wouldn't, you know, you could just see, me, I was, you know, scared. So you just do whatever guy.
Yeah.
But, you know, like them being out there picking up cigarette butts, it was like, you know, KP, you know, I mean, they were, and the other people that, I know you said you were in the reserves. I mean, basically we weren't too fond of the National Guard or the reserves.
Right.
NG would call them no good. But
90-day wonders.
yeah, because they were going home, so they didn't care. And So they had a nonchalant attitude, and you know, you kind of, there was really a division as far as, you know, the troops, as far as looking at these people. And then you had some people that shouldn't have been there. Some people, I remember one guy was always out of sync, you know, in the formations and exercises. And later on, they discovered he had a hearing problem. And he had, I think he had enlisted or something, and they said, well, how'd you get in? He said he had somebody else take the hearing test. And I said, I don't know how you could do that, but you know, that supposedly was the stories.
Yeah.
And you know, those guys were anybody that didn't perform, because you know the whole group got punished.
Yeah, right.
You know, you didn't get a weekend
bother
pass or
waiting to
something.
find who did it wrong. They just punish the whole group.
Yeah, right. And so if their locker wasn't met properly for inspections or whatever happened, I mean, those guys paid the penalty by a lot of the other guys. I mean, you know, blanket parties, whatever you want to call them, you know. I mean, I have to admit I never participated in that, but there were some guys that were brutal to the people that, you know, caused them problems.
Yeah, a lot of the recruits didn't shave yet, and they would come up and rub. I don't care whether you have a beard, you shave every morning.
Right.
And then they take your t-shirt, they turn it upside to see if there's anything on the inside. If there's any, if you're wearing yesterday's t-shirt, it's going to show up, you know, there.
So it was interesting.
How long was it, you remember?
8 weeks.
8 weeks?
Now,
Some
Chris
went
did
as much
fortunately.
as
Chris
12, 13 weeks.
Right. Well, you had 8 weeks of basic, 8 weeks of AIT. And then you
Of
went
what?
to advanced training.
Okay.
And then you went to Vietnam.
How, when you got out of Fort Knox, where did they assign you?
This was real interesting. I never got even leave after Fort Knox, if I remember right. Okay. What had happened is, but fortunately, Chris came down once or twice and met me at Fort Knox. Once, well, I think with my parents, and once you flew into Louisville
Yeah, I did.
and met me. What was funny is I signed up for officer candidate school. Okay. You know, they gave me that big speech, you know, you could be a second lieutenant and everything. And so I signed up for that, qualified, you know, but probably everybody qualified, who knows. And, but then before I had to commit, I changed my mind because I knew at that point everybody was going to Vietnam. I mean, your odds of not going was probably 1%.
Yeah.
And I just said, you know, wait a minute, I'm going to Vietnam. If in order to be an officer, you have to enlist for another year, minimum. I says, I don't want to be doing that, you know. So I backed out. I never officially, even though, you know, I had gone through some of the training and things like that, I says, I'm not signing this. I just do my 2 years and I'm out. Well, I wound up kind of like sticking with the same group for this advanced training.
How did they decide what your advanced training was going to be?
I have no idea. I know I did score very well on the test. Because of that, you know, they give you entrance tests when you come into the Army. I remember going for all kinds of tests, and I remember having a fairly high score as far as IQ or however they rate you.
How'd you do in high school?
You know, I went to Catholic school, which was a lot tougher. I probably was maybe a B student in a Catholic school, which is probably almost an A in public school, I guess. So I was pretty good.
Usually it's who they need.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes you're so remote from your evaluations because they need this body here.
Right.
So it's first what they need.
Right.
And second, they can be influenced by your test and your evaluation.
Right, and they try to boast you, but
Yeah.
he-
Yeah, I mean,
he
if
saw
they see a
through
winner,
it.
they'll try to
Yeah.
move you
He
over
saw
and
through it, though.
lure you with great stuff and money and all this other kind of stuff,
Right.
whatever it takes.
So I was supposed to go, going back to your original question, I was supposed to go to Fort Dix, New Jersey, right from Fort
Okay.
Knox. I don't have any idea what that, you know, what Fort Dix was noted for. back then.
Well, Fort Polk was Deadeye. You go to Polk, you're on your way to jungle warfare.
Yeah. So here we are, we go to Fort Dix, and we get there, I guess we probably flew, I can't remember back then, to be honest. But it's like noon, 1 o'clock, standing around, have a big formation. Guy comes out and says, "We don't have any room for you." I'm like, "What do you mean we don't have any room for you?" So you're going to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Oh my.
Now, keep in mind, Chris and I, the only place I've ever been, and we went to Niagara Falls for our honeymoon. I've been to Ohio when I was a teenager with the guys in high school, how you drive around, you know, Toledo, that type of stuff. So I've never basically been out of Michigan. My parents never took me on any vacations because I was a middle child. But that's a story in itself. But so I looked at this guy next to me. I said, "Missouri, where the hell is Missouri at?" I had no, I'm trying to visualize a map of the United States. I had no idea. He said, "Well, it's down south someplace, you know."
If you died and went to hell, this would be an improvement over going to Fort Leonard.
So here we are. Now, time we get out of there, again, I can't remember. I think we flew to St. Louis or something and took a bus, because, you know, Fort Leonard Wood's out. They call the Fort Lost in the Woods.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're getting in like 1 or 2 in the morning, you know, checking in and everything like that. I have no idea. And that MOS was for combat engineers. So that's why I spent the next 8 weeks.
Well, that's a pretty broad classification. You could end up handling garbage trucks
Right,
with that.
exactly,
But
right.
on the top side of it, you could end up doing something really interesting.
Right.
So how long, another 8 weeks?
Another 8 weeks, right. And that, at that point...
What was it specifically you did in the study routine?
Back then, it just seems like you were involved in like building these temporary pontoon bridges to get across water. Yeah, things like that. But nothing, you know, no heavy equipment, you know, which the combat engineers do get involved with, you know, bulldozers and things like that. But nothing, it almost was, I don't know, it wasn't no training for Vietnam.
They had plans for you.
Yeah. But again, I think I was stuck because I was with supposedly this officer candidate group of people. I think that's how I got kind of stuck going there.
Now mind, you're 2 years commitment.
Right.
If you can find something interesting to pass away enough time, they won't send you to Vietnam if you have less than a year left. So if you could find something to keep you busy for a year, you could avoid having to go to Vietnam.
Well, how are you going to do that?
Well, in my brother's case, he didn't go to Polk either. He went to Dix. And we thought, wow, he's not going, he's not going. So he came home, got married. And as soon after he got married, they sent him to Fort Polk, so we knew he was going. And my mother died after a long illness, so I had to bring him home. And we tried to keep them home long enough so they would recycle them.
I got you.
So they recycled them in Booth. And it was like 2 months short of a year. And they sent him over. So he spent over a year in Vietnam. But we did what we could do to... So, and again, it depends on what they need. If they needed you and you had 2 months, I guess they'd send you, but... So, nothing exciting. You did learn to do some construction work,
yeah, I don't know what that
engineering of some kind.
It was just another 8 weeks of hell.
Yeah.
And
And the weather was wonderful.
Oh yeah, that was nice. But that, it wasn't too bad. It was the fall.
Oh, you got a better part.
Yeah, yeah. It was like
Midsummers and winters are really bad.
probably would have been like, let's see, I went August. Probably would have been like November or something. I was down there.
Yeah.
So then after that, you know, you get 2 weeks. Oh, and then they, you know, they come around when it's that time to announce where you're going next, right? I mean,
was it any surprise where you were going to go?
Well, back then again, what was a surprise is you heard some of these people that or maybe the losers or something wind up going to someplace either in the States or Germany, you know, because they would call out, you would, you know, meet up as a company, and they would call your name and tell you where you were going. Well, almost everybody was going to Vietnam. I mean, I would have been shocked if I wasn't. But then you'd hear somebody get, it's kind of like, wait a minute, he's going, you know, stay in the United States, he's going to Germany. You know, nowadays you would say, who does he know? Back then you're not thinking of that stuff, you know. But again,
Well,
it would have been really shocking if you got one of those assignments. So then I call up, I say I'm coming home for 2 weeks, and then that's when you really start getting a little bit concerned, because now reality has set in that you are going to Vietnam.
yeah. Where did you go?
In Vietnam, I wound up in the Central Highlands, which is Pleiku Dak To, I think it is, area. Mainly in Pleiku area. But the route getting there and everything back then compared to what these guys got now was pretty interesting, because, you know, Vietnam's basically on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
So I think travel-wise, I think I left in early January. At least I was home for the holidays.
How did you travel?
Plane. Airplane.
You got shipped by plane. Boy, most of these guys got flat-bottom boats that
I think back then the Army was
seasick,
almost...
terrible.
I think the Army was mostly by plane back
Yeah.
then. So basically I flew from Detroit to someplace in California, then Hawaii, then the Philippines.
Did you get to have time off in any of those places?
Not to do anything. Basically, I think it was just you
Just
got off
come
the
in to
plane.
transfer
you
off to something
Yeah,
else?
you were there maybe an hour or two at the max.
Oh, boy.
You didn't do anything.
Kids.
And then Vietnam, and then I remember arriving in Vietnam was probably maybe the scariest day of your life, because I think we got in late at night, and we get on these buses with all these, like, some type of wire over the windows, side windows, and you had a person in a Jeep in front of you with one of those high caliber machine guns escorting the bus. And you're driving through these towns. I have no idea where I was at. And they're just, you know, there's still people at night, middle of the night out on the road, and they're just laying on the horns. But these people, you just see them scattering off the roads. There's no way they're going to stop for anything.
Right.
And you're just thinking, this is it.
Yeah.
I'm not lasting the freaking year here, you know. I mean, you know, think about it. You're 19. I mean, it was a scary night.
Not like driving through Toledo, eh?
Right. And then you get in, you know, you go through the orientation. Again, this is before you get to, you know, the Central Highlands is a whole nother trip, because again, you know, it's all processing type stuff with the Army. You don't go just land in with your unit. And so you get in, and fortunately in Vietnam you didn't do KP. They had the Vietnamese doing the KP. And fortunately I didn't get on the, I guess can I use the word shit burning detail. I never got that. That was ugly. And then so you process, and you got your orders for another place, and then you wind up in, again processing in Pleiku with this unit that I eventually wound up being with the rest of my time there. And there was only a couple of guys at that point that I had traveled with that still had the same assignment that I did. I didn't know them from the States. It was kind of like once we left California, I think, or I don't know where these couple guys I eventually knew. But what's kind of scary is these guys within a month were medevaced already back to the States because they got ambushed, and which made it a little bit more scarier yet, because the only couple of people I knew were already gone, you know, within weeks. So it was a matter of just, you know, getting used to a whole new situation.
Awful hard to make friends.
You know, nowadays it got, and we can talk later on a little bit about the Skype and all the stuff, you know, telephones, everything that the new military has nowadays. Over there, the biggest friends I made and we can get into my MOS and everything in a minute or so, was, which was really smart, was with the supply sergeant and the mess hall cook, one of those, each of those guys, which is probably, if you want to be friends with somebody, those are the two people to do it. And, but there wasn't, I didn't, you know, when you look back, I really didn't have a lot of friends. I mean, it's almost like it was a very tight-knit group, even though you're with the same people all the time, because a lot of times people were rotating out of there.
A lot of movement, but in some cases, you don't want to make friends, because tomorrow they're dead.
Well,
and that conversion is too hard to adapt to. And
well, fortunately, I was still with the combat engineer unit, okay, when I got over there. Fortunately, I didn't see a lot of combat.
yeah.
So I did what you just described. I saw most of the people that had, except for these two guys that, and when they got ambushed, I never saw them. I mean, they didn't get killed, they just got medevaced out, okay? So most of the injuries we had in our unit were from...
Incident to your job assignments?
Yes, like heavy equipment operators would lose a hand or something like that. So those were the major combat issues, okay? So, which was fortunate, you know, that I wasn't seeing that on a day-by-day basis. Now, I'm sure you have other questions as far as the daily routine. I mean, we did have, it wasn't like we didn't have combat. I mean, we had incoming mortars and things like that, but nothing, a far cry from the guy that was out infantry out in the...
Your assigned group was in a camp.
Most of the time, right.
Yeah, that had clearances outside the camp to keep anybody from invading close to the camp?
What we did is we had, you know, the barbed wire, concertina, fencing, whatever they call it, around the whole, we still, you know, I had guard duty and everything like everybody else. So we were our own protection. Okay, it wasn't like we had infantry or somebody protecting us.
No,
we had our own troops, you know. There was another Army unit across the street from us. And then the Air Force Base, which I think was part of our problem, was probably maybe 5 miles or something away. And so I think a lot of times we got incoming mortar because of the Air Force Base was drawing fire.
Yeah.
So it might have not been as bad as a big
What kind of an air base?
I don't even remember. It was a huge Air Force Base.
Yeah. Now, I assume you had, or some of the troops, the infantry people had assignments every day or two where they go out on a...
But not on ours. We didn't have, we can't remember, we didn't have infantry. It was us. Now, later, what was kind of crazy...
You're kind of a support function to a lot of others.
Right.
So you probably were withdrawn from the close attack areas.
Except when we were out in the field.
Yeah.
Which I didn't go out in the field that often. So most of our attack, again, was these middle of the night type incoming rounds, you know, sniper, some sniper fire. Yeah, which it was just a mental type thing as far as... but later on, it got kind of crazy because you get some of these guys, I don't know how it wound up happening, they formed some type of patrol that they could go out on. And there'd be people volunteering. And, you know, I guess after a while, these people just were looking for something more than what they were doing.
Right.
And I always kind of was amazed that these people would do that.
Different than what we had been familiar with from previous wars. You just get a big area, enough for your camp, and then they sweep another big area.
Yeah, right. We never did
where you had the wire, what you call it, wire?
I think concertina or concertina, something like that. I forget what it's called. It's that circular barbed wire.
And then there was even clearances even further than that, so that nobody could get close enough to do anything. I mean, it was too much cleared area, and then there'd be a couple of places where you could climb up and get a better view of the site from a higher level, and then go on these patrols just nonsense things.
Right.
Go out and shake up this area and then shake up this area, and they may be gone a day or part of a day. And
Right. But that was really rare, I'd say, for
Yeah.
our company. I mean, that kind of seemed like it happened months after I was there, that somebody decided on doing that, and I don't even know that much
Can you
about it.
imagine volunteering to go on a patrol?
Well, the other thing that was crazy is, you always had new people coming into the unit. We'd have people coming from Germany or Korea, South Korea,
Being reassigned?
transferred. No, they transferred. They wanted to get transferred to
My
Vietnam.
goodness.
And I would just say, you guys are idiots. Well, why'd you come here? Well, it was boring. South Korea was cold. I mean, some lame excuse. Now, the one thing I have to admit, if you were a lifer, you wanted to be in a war zone.
Yeah,
I mean, what a way to make
Well-
rank.
yeah.
And, extend your tour, whatever. I mean, if I would have stayed in the States, the highest rank I probably would have been a PFC, E3, maybe, in 2 years. I wound up coming out in E5 because being in a combat zone and what I went through, because a lot of times it was a survivor rate too. A lot of people, you're doing much more than you would in the States. I mean, I'm not patting myself on the back, but I probably did deserve to be an E5 till I got out of there. But if you're a lifer, boy, these guys now with these present wars, Syria, they want stuff to happen.
Right. It's interesting. It came out in World War II. You're fighting somebody who feels they're going to go to heaven if they die. I don't want to fight somebody like that. That's not fair.
Right.
I mean, I'd like to go to heaven too, but I'm not ready to go, and they're ready.
Yeah.
And it got even worse when you got into Korea and then Vietnam. I think just get progressively worse, where you're fighting somebody that's just not fair to be fighting. And the bad guys, so to speak, don't care about sending troops and having them all killed. Just send a bunch more. It was send them in, kill them all, send some more. That's not our philosophy in general. So it's hard. What's going on with you all this time? You must know where he was.
Received a lot of letters from him. There was a lot
I'm
of
sure you
worry.
don't know all of the bad stuff because he
No.
probably didn't tell you, but it may even make your mind wander more knowing where he's involved.
Yeah, there was a lot of letters that I got that, he showed his concern, his worry, which I felt deeply at the time.
Mhm.
And I worried almost every time I got a letter. I didn't know what was going to be happening next to him. And
Did
I
you
just
read
kept-
papers about what?
I did.
That probably made it worse.
It did. And, again, there wasn't too much concern for Vietnam vets. There was never any praise.
That's even
or-
worse.
Yeah, and that was always disappointing. It just seemed like the men there never got any praise or recognition, especially, most of the time when they were coming home on leave or anything. It just seemed like it was never the welcoming committee for them ever.
Did you get any backlash or any flack because you happened to be?
No,
No?
not really, not from my friends. Some of them were in similar situations, not too many of them,
Mhm.
but nobody really talked about things like that.
Really?
Yeah, it was just kept silent. So I suffered sort of in silence, and,
Always worried about the next
I was.
postcard or the next telegram or?
Yeah. And communication, the only form of communication was just mainly our letters back and forth to each other.
Did any of your friends get that terrible telegram that,
No, not really.
actually, I don't even know, were they still doing that back then?
There was his good friend that was in the service that was hurt, Jerry, at one point.
Well, Jerry Verhoeven,
Yeah.
he didn't get killed, he just got
No,
hurt.
he was just hurt real severely.
But they
and
notify
that
the
touched
family,
home.
don't they?
Yeah, it was kind of unusual circumstance. Like I said, he was in the Army, but drafted, but he was in a more combat type situation. And he had to get medevac for shrapnel damage. And I remember I was already home, and I was over at his parents' house when they got a notice that he had been medevac because of getting hurt.
Was it a telegram?
I don't remember, to be honest with you. All I remember is parents were really concerned, asking me all kinds of questions because they knew I was there, and I really, wasn't very helpful. You have to remember, in Vietnam, again, going back to, it took a week to get a letter, okay, or a package or anything. So, that was really old news by then.
Yeah.
And anything you got for a package, a lot of times you would get cookies and stuff like that. They would be smashed and everything by the time they got there. But it didn't matter. You were just happy. When it was
just to get the box.
When it was mail time, there was always people that didn't get anything.
Right.
Or if somebody did get, and there was people would ask for toilet paper, since it was rare to have toilet paper in Vietnam. Okay, so people would actually ask their relatives.
They send some of the.
And then the one guy I replaced, which was really bizarre, was getting the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
Now we're talking 67. I don't know what his parents' background was, what his background was. Who would get the Wall Street Journal in Vietnam? It's not like nowadays.
Right.
Maybe you could just somebody in the Middle East getting the Wall Street Journal. I don't even know why you would do that.
Well, you get it on the internet now, and they've got those all over.
But obviously those things just, some of the stuff just got tossed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the mail call, I remember that was probably the most...
Sometimes we don't talk about this in these interviews, but what goes on in the minds of parents when all this is going on? And if they hadn't been involved in any kind of service, they're home and they're thinking, what can I send them? Sometimes some of the strange things they would send is just something to read, and pick up the Wall Street or pick up something unaware of how inappropriate that would seem to be and strange. For some reason, we've never. Some of the fellows will talk about leaving and what their parents' attitudes were or reactions, and when they came home. But for the most part, we don't really talk about what went on when mom parts with 2 or 3 sons at the same time and has to suffer through that for several years. That's pretty tough. It's an interesting question. I should find out some way we could.
Well, I know I would visit his parents at least weekly. Of course, his mom and dad, he mentioned he had a younger brother, but I hope Jeff is about 15 years younger.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. And so they were quite busy with their young son, but I could see the worry in their faces.
Yeah.
And they did talk to me. They would always show their concern and worry.
Yeah.
So,
Well, he would have been 5, 6
Yeah.
when you went in.
young.
Yeah, he was real young.
I mean, hell, he wouldn't even have been 10 when you got out.
Yeah, he was real little when I got out, I remember.
Yeah.
He probably was about maybe 6 when I got out, so he probably was about 4 or so when I got drafted.
My brother is 10 years younger than I am, and I was in college when he was in Vietnam. And interesting, they used to send letters, and he would draw a picture of a stamp. I forgot what he had in it, inside of it, but it was just a picture of free. He wrote in the word free. So I would get these letters with this pencil stamp drawn on it with free.
Well,
That was just kind of strange. How the hell would that be picked up and handled by the post office? Anything different?
The mail was free.
Yeah.
Now, one thing, my mom wrote me a lot of letters. In fact, I did have some. She had some of them that was interesting that I had wrote her back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what my comments was to her, it seemed like it was almost redundant, the same things over and over. But I don't ever remember. My dad wasn't a writer, and my brother was only a year younger. My sister's like a couple years older. They never wrote me. If they did, I don't remember. So it's kind of like they were already doing their own thing.
And dealing with that differently. each of us deal with these kind of pains differently, as
Yes.
you spoke about his parents. I know all of us, I'm from a family of 5, and I remember how we all agonized over Paul going to Vietnam. That was not a favorite thing, but we all did just little different things. Paul was kind of a baby of the family, and I still treat him that way. So, interesting, the reaction to the families. And well, were there any other incidents or activities that you got involved in while you were there? I expect you were there for a year.
Well, what happened, I was there actually around 11 months. I wound up getting medevaced out of there. I didn't make it a full year, but probably, again, once you're there for a while, you know, when you started getting close, like 90 days back, you start making these short timer calendars where you color in each day that you have left. Okay, so that was always interesting. And usually,
what does that feel like when I don't know what's the cutoff?
90 days, I think, if I remember right. Maybe some guys had long, and you know, some of them would have some. I don't know how they would get a prep. What they had, sometimes it was just a picture of a girl or something, you know, like a silhouette type of girl with numbers 90 down that you just, and it was always kind of scary because there would always be some people that would never get down to the end.
Yeah.
And they'd be medevac. And so it had its pluses and minuses that, you know, you didn't know if you were going to get down to 0.
So you weren't on a point system. Some of them would be on a point. You had to earn so many points in order to get out.
No.
They had a different system.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that at all.
Yeah.
But
Korea in World War II, they had so many points to accumulate before you could be discharged.
Yeah. No, it was just a year in Vietnam.
And some that were in the European theater were shipped after Germany surrendered, were shipped to the Pacific because they didn't have enough points. And they got shipped across the world, to the other side of the world, to spend time fighting in the Pacific War because they didn't have the point system they needed to do it.
I think with Vietnam, if I remember right, the big advantage is if you went to Vietnam, you didn't have to be in any active reserves or anything like that when you came back. You know how it's normally a 6-year commitment.
Yeah, 6 or 8. Yeah.
I think being in Vietnam got you off the hook for any of that type of stuff. Okay, which was probably the only positive.
Were you ever exposed to some of the local folks?
Yes, definitely.
What was that like?
You didn't know who was who.
That's probably the most common comment that I've heard. Whenever you saw one, you could identify them as being Vietnamese, but you couldn't tell whether they were Cong,
right,
or whether they're from the Viet Army. So you didn't know who.
Right.
Or the local citizenry, and even some of the kids.
The scary part when you first got there, you know, they'd have people come on base, mama-san, a baby-san could be a 50-year-old woman. If she's not married, she's considered a baby-san, which is kind of bizarre. You know, you think of a baby-san as a young girl or something, right, or a kid. And we would have hired the women to come on base to do your laundry, okay? And also the Vietnamese would cut hair. So I remember the first time I got there, because, you know, they ingrain in you don't trust anybody.
Right.
I remember the first time I went to get a haircut, and you know, and this Vietnamese has one of these safety razors, and I'm thinking, you know. And then after a while, you just, you know, just get used to it, but it is a little bit difficult the first time around. And they were nice people. I mean, I had a very good, I had a picture from our wedding, 8x10 picture, that this woman just was amazed because, you know, Chris was dressed in her wedding dress, and she just, you know, if you look at their situations and she's looking at this picture, she was just, you know, it was unbelievable. But most of the people I got along good. I was a little bit nervous in town. I didn't go to town that often. You know, again, I was married, so I think I was a little bit more disciplined than some of the other guys that were 19 years old. And plus, the Army scares the heck out of you as far as, you know, diseases, you know, sexually transmitted diseases. What can happen? They would tell you, you know, you get this, you're going to be wound up in the Philippines someplace, you're not going home because there's no cure for it. So they would try to scare the heck out of these young guys, but a lot of them didn't matter. They figured they would go home anyways.
Right.
But, so, I'm trying to think where I was going with this.
That's an interesting comment.
So,
We've interviewed them where some would say the same thing you did, and then others say, well, if you got feeling bad after you've been into town, you go to the doctor and get a shot.
Monday morning, they'd be lined up at the clinic.
I mean, it was just like, something happens, we just go get a shot.
But I would say most of the time I was there, I wasn't in town very much, even though, you know, first of all, I didn't have time to get in town. You had to get a ride into town. I didn't have a lot of guys I knew. I didn't really have a need, like I said, being married. But I did get there a few times, and so I guess I'm leading up to, I know I was going to say, as far as drinking, like they always warned you, you unscrew the bottle of beer. You don't let them bring you a drink out of the bag that has already been opened, or a mixed drink or anything like
drink
that.
Anything that isn't bottled or canned.
And don't let anybody open it.
Right.
But
and even that doesn't guarantee it. Don't eat anything that's not cooked.
Well, I would never eat it in town.
Yeah.
So we did have a club in our base, okay, which, you know, drinking, for drinking purposes, you know, I mean, you can get beer and whatever so darn cheap. So that's where that's where if I did any extra activities, would have been on base.
Now, you're not in a battle zone. Where you're talking about is deep in the middle of South Vietnam.
Right, right.
So you're not really, but as one told me, the enemy is everywhere.
Right.
No matter where you go, there's the enemy, and you can't tell the difference.
Right. But you know, you just get complacent after a while. You know, you just watch when you're in town.
True.
You watch. So, you know, in town a lot of times when I would go, these kids would come up and start polishing your boots.
Yeah.
Just automatically. And, you know, which made me nervous because, you know, and then all of a sudden somebody's grabbing the, you know, for your wallet or whatever you carry back then, or your weapon.
Kids were
and
good at that.
you got to the point where you almost, unfortunately, wind up kicking these kids because it was ingrained in your mind that you can't trust them.
Yeah.
You know, and even though they might have been legit, you know, again, you know,
but they're all out after money just because.
There was an actual picture he took one time at random, and we could actually, I told him, I says, it looks like this young kid is pickpocketing somebody. They were in that type of
yeah, I'm not sure if it's just.
They get good at it.
If it's just the angle, and you never left anything in the Jeep. Oh my God, you know, you'd be crazy. But like I said, I didn't venture into towns that much, and I did try to get over to the Air Force Base, and that was a problem.
What was it like over there? Just bigger and a lot more things you could do?
The opposite of the Army. The opposite. We didn't like the Air Force. Yeah, I tell you why. First of all, you went over there, all their uniforms were just like they just came out of the cleaners.
Right.
Okay. Secondly, they had air conditioning. They had mailboxes, like a post office. They hated you. You came on base, you had to check your weapon. We would go there because they had nice PXs, you know the snack bars. So once in a great while, we'd be able to get over on base. Well, when you go through the gates, you know, your Army, you know, you're all grubby and everything. It's basically, they treated you almost like the enemy. And so over the years, just from seeing the day and night, and I know, you know, the Air Force had a function, you know, I mean, the planes and everything like that performed a huge function in the war, but
Well, their job wasn't grubby.
right. So you can
Sensitive.
so you can just imagine, it's like two different societies that
Yeah,
to get
existing
along.
together.
Right. And I mean, to
Then you
this,
had a Marine Corps in there, and that's a completely different
yeah, which I never saw. But,
group of people. Well, those are the ones that would be on those platoons.
Mhm.
Usually the Marine Corps were the ones that went on those.
And then I had one other incident with the Air Force is, the USO shows. They had Nancy Sinatra in town.
Really?
Those boots are made for walking.
Right?
Okay. So I was able to get over. I knew she was going to be there. I don't know how I got over there. I get there. Oh, you're Army. I mean, I probably was like I probably was next to the barbed wire fence. That's how far back I was. I mean, I could see something on the stage and I could hear her, but that's the closest I ever got to see it. And again, that was kind of like, I mean, they did do a good job. If you were people that were like hospitalized or had problems, they did have them right up front.
You had to come up limping
But-
to get your
But
ticket.
if you were Army, it
That's
was again
surprising.
you were
I've never heard
treated
that.
pretty bad because it was on the Air Force base again.
Yeah.
I never saw they never did anything on an Army base. They never had any shows there.
Is that the only celebrity you recall?
That was the only one because again I didn't get out that much. It was it's just the nature of the beast.
What was the publication that circulated around to tell you what was going on in the world?
There was I think the U.S. Army Times, but you know
Is that what it was?
You didn't. I
I
don't
don't
think I
remember
remember.
what the other one was. Korea and World War II had this newspaper, newspaper, and it was published somewhere separate, and most of the folks and the guys that I talked with, it was nice to see what was going on, although it was limited, but at least it gave you some of the big stuff. And in it, they would tell you when another celebrity troupe was coming around to alert you to the fact that if you could get to it. Some had seen Bob Hope and some other groups that came on. That must have been nice. Nancy was pretty big time then. That was pretty.
It was good hearing her song, but we did have movies. I can get into that in a minute, but going back to newspapers, there was somehow we have had something going on because during that time in '67, Detroit had the race riots going on,
That's right.
and Chris worked in Highland Park at Sears at
Ooh.
the time, and that was my big concern, and it was funny because people knew I was from the Detroit area, and they says, hey, they're going to send you back to Detroit. They need you more than they need you here. And that was kind of like the
Highland
joke.
Park was pretty rough.
It was. I remember being home, I think, for about a week, and
Oh,
back
yeah.
a week later, and things got back to normal, but it was a really scary time. I know he was really worried.
Yeah, I worked in Detroit and used to, when I went north, I used to try to find ways to avoid going through Highland Park because I don't know why, but that was worse than going to 12th Street. Maybe it was on a par.
Yeah.
12th was Detroit's worst area, and Highland Park, find a way to get around going there. Any other areas that you can recall?
Well, going back to, once I was there a month, this was probably one of the other, I've only seen one person actually die in front of me. I've seen these people get hurt. So I had to get, I was in Vietnam maybe a month. I got real sick, and they medevaced me to another city for, a hospital. But I was a walking type person.
Yeah.
It wasn't a battle injury type thing. And I remember waiting in this, it kind of reminds me of MASH. Remember that movie MASH?
Yep.
And I'm sitting there just waiting to see a doctor. Okay. And they're helicoptering these people and working on it. They bring this one guy in. Now he's probably sitting from me to Gary, they're working on it. I'm just sitting there watching all these doctors.
Wow.
Then all of a sudden, there's this big hush. Everybody just starts walking away. There's blood all over the floor. They come over, put a guy in a body bag, zip him up and tag him. Now, I'm 19, I've been in Vietnam for a month. I'm saying, there's no way in hell I'm lasting 12 months here. And then they sent me back to my unit. Now, I still had health issues the rest of the time there, but it was kind of like,
problem, do you know?
I had ulcerative colitis back then, and a lot of it, you know, it's a stomach type issue. A lot of times the food, the water, the stress just makes things worse. Okay,
Yeah.
need a lot of blood transfusions and things like that. And but they sent me back to my unit, and so it's kind of like, okay, I guess I got to hoof it out here for another 10 or 11 months, and I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself here, but about October, November, maybe like into November, somehow I finally got to see a dentist. You never get to see a dentist in the military. I don't know how I wound up, maybe because they knew I was going home eventually, somehow I got to see a dentist. And the dentist looked at me, and apparently my physical condition says, we got to get you in hospital. So before I know it, I'm in a hospital, they're running all kinds of tests, we got to get you back to the States. So I never even got back, after the dentist, I never even got back to my unit to pack up. They wound up sending everything back home. Okay? And again, we can circle back to some of the other things going on in Vietnam, but since we're on this subject, I remember, again, remember this mail takes a week, right? So she has no idea what's going on. And I remember I'm in this hospital, and again, they get incoming mortar attacks. I remember having to get out of the bed, climbing underneath the bed, just, you know, as a precaution. So I write her a letter saying, but I know she's not going to get it, so I get medevaced, and that route back basically was to Japan, Alaska, and some naval base north of Chicago. That was my trip home.
Great Lakes?
Yeah, okay. And the funniest part of that trip was, well, it was neat knowing you were going home.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's, when they got to Alaska, we didn't get off, but they opened up the doors. And somebody got on, I remember, I don't know if it was a stewardess or somebody, just welcoming us back home. And I remember the cold air blowing into the plane, and it was like we're on U.S. soil. You know what I mean? It was probably really a great feeling at that point in time. And then, so we get into this Great Lakes Naval Base. Now it's Thanksgiving Day. Okay. And I'm figuring, oh, I'm going to get this nice Thanksgiving Day meal. Well, by the time I got to settled in and everything, it's like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Well, typical government, their Thanksgiving meal was like at noon, 1 o'clock. So, too bad, I wound up getting a sandwich or something, you know. And so I don't know how long I was there, maybe a week or so. Again, you got to remember I'm quite ill.
What was the illness? Or
it was ulcerative colitis.
Oh, again? When
Oh,
you
yeah,
went to
this
the
whole
dentist, that came out?
This whole time
Wow.
that I'm in Vietnam, from about a month after I got there.
Hmm.
Really, I probably should have been out of there after a month. But nobody sent me back. At 19 years old, you're not going to say, hey, you know.
I'm sick, send me home.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, fat
you know,
chance.
Right. So, it was kind of funny because I think I did call you from there. I'm not sure how and told her that I was home, and but I didn't know when I was coming back to Michigan. Okay. And
When you were in Alaska, do you remember where you were?
I was either Fairbanks or Anchorage, one of those places, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So it was pretty neat because I called my parents when I finally knew I was coming back home for a week off or 2 weeks, you know, convalescent leave, I guess you could call it. And I remember my parents picked me up at the airport, which was pretty neat. and took me as a surprise to where she was working.
Yeah.
Did you know?
No, it was a
Oh,
total surprise.
my goodness.
So I was just very happy,
Oh,
very
That
ecstatic.
must have been a thrill.
Yeah,
Surprise? Wow.
definitely. He was just standing there in the distance. It took me a while before I saw him, and then I went up to him and.
Were you
I
still
was
in
just
your
very
uniform?
happy.
Yes. Oh
Which
yeah,
is
I always wore my
probably all you
uniform
had.
early. Yeah, back then you always wore your uniform. You didn't have any clothes.
What was the first thing that went through your mind when you saw him?
I was just relieved that he was home and happy.
You had
and-
any idea he was coming home?
No, I don't think
Well,
I
I think
did.
you knew I was in the States, but she didn't know I was coming
Right,
to Michigan.
because his parents, it was just sort of a surprise, but
Probably
I
didn't.
was shocked. I was shocked. I was just relieved to
Just
see him.
lose it, eh?
Yeah, very happy. Was crying.
I think your coworkers were pretty
Yeah.
shocked too.
Yeah, it was definitely an exciting time. I was just so happy that he was home.
Now, what's the first thing you said?
I think I said, I love you.
Uh,
Hugged him, kissed him. I was just glad that he
Oh,
was
that's
home.
great.
So, it was wonderful.
I mean, just can't imagine what would come over me. What would I say? What could, just lost for words.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, it's pretty neat too, seeing my parents and
Yeah.
Jeff, my little brother at that time, walking down the airport to meet me. You know what I mean?
Did he know what was going on?
I doubt it.
Gosh, he couldn't have been more than,
No,
what,
he
6,
probably,
7?
he might not even been that old. He might have
Yeah.
been like 5 or something.
This is neat, I'm in an airport.
So, back then.
Actually, he probably wouldn't even, maybe had a hard time remembering you, because
Yeah.
he wasn't of
Right.
a age when you left. That,
Right. So I was home for, I don't know what they gave me, a week or two. Well, they didn't tell me that I need to watch what I'm eating and everything. So, you're back in the States, just going nuts with spicy type, eating things I shouldn't be eating because of my condition. And I go back, I'm sicker than when I left the hospital, okay? And now I'm reassigned back to Fort Knox, Kentucky, but a hospital there.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's my stay for the rest of my military career. So from probably this would have been now early December when I went back, that's where I had to report to, until May when I finally got discharged. So I'm in the hospital for, what is that, 5 months. So I get back, they checked me out. I had to have, I don't know, how many more pints of blood because I lost so much blood. Yellow jaundice, whatever. And the doctor's kind of like yelling at me. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I mean, nobody told me, you got to be careful what you're eating, blah, 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 So I think within the next 5 months, there was maybe another couple times where the government did let me fly home for like a week or 2 leave.
Oh, wow.
And because they knew I was, first of all, I was still pretty sick, so I had to be hospitalized. And then there was this whole transition about being released from the Army. It wasn't like an overnight thing. So it was good that I was able to come home a few times. I don't remember too many about those visits. I just remember being in the hospital so darn much. But again, I was able to get up and around. I used to go down. It's kind of funny how you remember I used to always go down into the snack bar. It seemed like every day I was getting like a grilled cheese, because you didn't want to eat the hospital food at that point anymore. So I just spent it.
Yeah.
And I remember these, every once in a while I'd have some kid that was in basic training have to be in the hospital for some reason, and he'd be whining there how difficult basic training is. He'd be whining about Vietnam, and I would just get it. I'd just get at his face like, you don't even know what the heck you're here for, And it was kind of funny seeing those type of people because, you've been around the block at that point. And then the whole discharge process as far as what my options were, you didn't have a whole lot of counseling as far as what decisions to make and everything.
Yeah.
They're asking you, you know, where you plan to be in the military, you know, all your life and things like that. And I wound up going on temporary disability for 5 years after I got discharged.
Oh my goodness. So he comes home, you go through this, he stops in at work and he's home, and all of a sudden he's whisked away. I mean, he could have been in Vietnam as much as being
Well,
in Kentucky.
I think I was
No, I
aware.
would have never went back to Vietnam.
No, but I mean, you're far enough away
Oh.
where you
Oh, yeah.
really can't,
Right.
Right.
wouldn't make any difference where you were. You were far enough away where it wasn't practical to try to,
Right, but the thing of it is I think we both knew at that point that sooner or later he would be coming back home, even though, you know, he still had a long way to go, so.
and assurances that small likelihood you'd ever get shipped back there.
Right.
Yeah.
I suppose being safe a long way away is better than being in that situation
Right.
Yeah, I was just.
where you're worrying every day.
I was just relieved that he was where he was at, he was more safer, and hopefully they were going to be sending him back there, but I
This would have been
didn't think he would.
1967.
This would have been end of '67, early '68.
What was your communication vehicles?
Just a
Still
phone.
letter or phone?
Yeah, payphone. Government don't give you a phone. You never had a phone.
Yeah,
I don't even remember how I called. If I don't know, I think I put money in the phone back then.
yeah,
It was just like when you were in basic training, you were lined up to use a phone booth.
yeah.
As I said, I'm
Yeah.
envious of these guys nowadays. You know, they got the cell phones and everything else.
Wasn't there one time you had a friend who had a reel-to-reel and you sent me something home that was, that you had, yeah, I do remember
Oh, a
that.
tape message maybe?
Yeah, but it was, yeah.
I don't remember.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
I bought one of those Sony big reel-to-reel
Yeah.
tape recorders, but I thought I had that sent to her. But maybe somebody taped something for me. They had some type
I
of.
thought it was you talking.
Was it?
Yeah, the big reel-to-reel, yeah.
I kept that
That's
for
funny.
years.
Well, then you'd have to figure out a way to
Well,
tape it.
we did, but I remember somebody was with me, so whatever he was telling me, it wasn't very private. You know, it's not like we had any privacy.
Right.
So, but I wish I would have saved that
Yeah.
tape. I can't remember everything on it, but it was quite amazing hearing you
Well,
on
that
that
was
tape.
neat.
Yeah.
It's funny how times have
But
changed.
everything, like Dennis said, it was either through phone communication or through letters. Was the only form
Well,
of communication.
even though that was kind of rough, it was certainly better than having them across the pond, where
Definitely.
letters can be sort of, they're good when it's the only thing, but they're sort of impersonal if, yeah, maybe you get spoiled with that.
And all these doctors were just, they weren't career doctors. They were just in there doing their time too. You know,
Yeah.
whenever you saw a doctor in the hospital, you knew he wasn't going to be there more than a few years, and then he was looking to go back to private life.
Yeah,
So, but I was going to say back to in Vietnam. Oh, if you want to circle back to Vietnam now, the other thing is we did get an R&R. I had several options there where I wanted to go, and I picked obviously Hawaii so she could meet me.
Oh,
And that was in
yeah.
October.
Yeah,
And she came with her dad. He flew over.
nice.
And what had happened is, just to backtrack a little bit, when we first got married, we had an upper flat in Detroit that we wound up renting for a
Uh-huh.
couple months till I got drafted. And I insisted that her dad lived in a small house in Warren by himself, that I didn't want her living in Detroit while I'm gone. So she wound up moving with her dad basically while I was in the military the whole time. So that was another reason I think that he wound up coming with her to Hawaii. Plus, you know, he's a single.
Yeah,
He was-
my dad was divorced and
He wanted to get away and see
he wanted
something.
to get away. I don't think we were too happy that my dad joined
Yeah,
us,
but-
but he kept his distance, you know, he did his own thing.
Yeah, that's gotta be
So,
tough.
yeah.
Well, and he did more tourist type things than we did, you know.
Yeah.
But Hawaii was really
Which island were you on?
just the main one, where Honolulu is.
Oh,
Oahu,
Oahu.
yeah.
Yes.
That's the only way. And you had options. A lot of people could go to Thailand,
Yeah.
There was like 5 different options, but obviously she couldn't go there. I mean,
Yeah,
so for, you know, if you're married, that was a
Yeah.
thing. But the thing with Hawaii is, you know, for me, I come home back then. Miniskirts was a big deal in '68, okay, or '7, and so you're now leaving Vietnam, coming to Hawaii, with, you know, just completely different
Yeah.
situation, and that was a cultural shock for me. And in fact, we had a lot of people, surprisingly, that went on R&R to Hawaii and never came back.
wow,
Caught another flight to the States and just went AWOL.
really?
So, and we could talk about that a little bit if you want to remind me to circle back about some of the people that did go AWOL. But the worst thing was leaving Hawaii to come back to Vietnam. Because now I had a taste, I had to go back for roughly 2 to 3 months, and then you're really worried that you're never going home.
Mm-hmm.
So when I left Hawaii, I got into some big Air Force base in Vietnam after I left. And I remember the first thing I saw was these Vietnamese men, especially the women, they wear those like black pajamas, big straw hats like. And I just, as a kid, just had a hatred for the Vietnamese people. Just for a short period of time. You know, don't get me wrong. But it's kind of like, what am I doing here?
Yeah,
You know, I mean, I never felt that way in the beginning or any other time. It's just for like when I had to go back, because I guess I just didn't see any reason for, you know, after spending, you know, 8, 9 months there, whatever it was.
those kind of feelings are common when you talk to some of the vets, particularly the Japanese and the Germans, and then when you get cross-culture, the Chinese and the Koreans, and even today, if you're South Korean, you don't like North Koreans, they're bad guys. Or if you're Taiwanese, and they're just different cultures, and they don't, a lot of emotional detachment that seems in those countries, even from each other.
But like I said, I think it's just a feeling that, you know, like, why are we here at this point?
Yeah.
You know.
Well, there were a lot of those kind of questions circulating even back here in the
Right,
U.S.
exactly. Right.
What
with
the hell were
protest,
we
the
there?
protest, right.
That carried on well after.
And going back, you know, to the traveling, once I got back in the States and you sensed the population, how they felt about the war, then once I came home, I think I remember started wearing more civilian clothes, traveling back and forth to the hospital.
Yeah, I would imagine
Because
that's just a lot less hassle.
I just didn't want people looking at me. You know, I wouldn't even say anything to the stewardess or anything like that, or we just kind of kept a low profile.
You know, that's funny because since then, I've been in airports where a troop of vets would come through and everybody would stand
Right.
right in the middle of and start clapping.
Right.
I've seen that more frequently than of late than
Right.
I did before. Expression of appreciation right in front of everybody. You were when you came home. Let's circle back. The issue of AWOL coming up.
Yeah.
Tell me something about
Okay.
that.
Well, let me. You know, you really didn't ask me too much about what I did in Vietnam, so you're going to find this interesting. I wound up being the company clerk. Okay, and again, I think maybe because how I placed on these aptitude tests or whatever. But when I checked in, because you're going to replace whoever's getting recycled back to, you know, the U.S. It basically didn't really matter too much. You know, they need a company clerk. They asked me if I want to be I said, well, a company clerk, that's better than being a rifle out in the...
I can do that.
Yeah, and so, but I'm always kind of hesitant about telling people I'm a company clerk because they have these visions like a clerk back here in the United States,
Right.
desk job, right? And I always kind of picture myself as being like Radar from MASH,
Yeah. Yeah.
jack of all trades, okay? And I was really involved, and I worked, almost round the clock. I mean, when you're in a combat zone, being a company clerk is different than being in Fort Knox.
Sure.
Okay? So I'm always a little bit hesitant because I think it has that connotation as, oh, white collar,
Yeah.
desk jockey, okay? So I was involved basically with everything. I mean, people get injured, I have to go to the hospital, just coordinate everything,
A lot of important record
Exactly,
keeping.
payroll. Like I said, I didn't go out in the field as much as the other people would. I had to be in base camp. But I did have a lot of activities. So we're getting around to Article 15, which is a lesser penalty than a court-martial, okay? Usually if you got Article 15, maybe you'd lose a month pay, some other type of penalty. Court-martial, you basically almost went to jail and lost rank and whatever, So you didn't want to get court-martialed. And most of the people got Article 15s, sleeping on guard, which is still pretty serious, but I think maybe first offense, that's what you would get, or doing something stupid. So what happened is we always had counseling people, that I was involved with Article 15s and court martials. Sleep on guard was part of the worst one. That it is difficult. You're working all day, and then you got to pull guard duty. And guard duty wasn't any fun. I had guard duty. You had a couple different things. You had these real tall towers that you'd have to sit at the top and basically overlook the perimeter. We had like a mountain yard village on the other side of our perimeter, and the mountain yard people are basically their farmers. Okay, and but you still never knew, if it was friendly or not. So that was one aspect of being guard duty, up on top of the tall tower, or you'd be at the lower bunker with all the sandbags. Well, the problem was the rats. At the lower level, you could hear these, and these rats were the size of cats.
Yeah.
So you'd hear something. There was times I would just get out of the bunker because, you hear something in there. I mean, so you just get out. Or if you find yourself kind of like dozing off, the last thing you want to do is to making the rounds, to checking to make sure you're awake, and you're snoozing. So a lot of times I would just get out and walk around. So, like I said, there was a lot of people, unfortunately, which really wasn't fair, but, it's a war zone. I mean, you're working all day long, and then, 12 to 3, you're on guard duty in the middle of the night, and then you still got to get up at 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning. There was no light you get to sleep in. And then the alerts. I told you we had the incoming alerts constantly. And again, there's no sleeping in.
They don't pick good times for that.
Oh, right. And those were some interesting things. Just circling back to these rats, we had around our mess hall and our barracks, it had this white powder crap for the rats. It was always kind of funny. You could just walk around the whole perimeter and you would just see this stuff. Because, like I said, they were huge. In fact, to this day, my wife will probably, I'm kind of afraid if we have any type of environment or things like that, it's kind of like, hey, she gets involved with it. And I really think it's from that. I mean, I won't get out with trying to catch a mouse or anything, which might sound stupid, but I think it reverts, it's scary type of stuff. So, so going back to these, so like I said, I'm constantly involved with these Article 15s. Then you'd have these guys, back in Vietnam, if you, 1-year tour, if you agreed to extend your stay for 6 more months, you got to go home for 30 days. 30-day leave. Pretty darn nice, right? Especially if you're a career guy. Well, even people that weren't career guys go home, never come back. I'd be sitting there as a company clerk. Hey, Joe Blow's not back.
How long do you track them?
We don't track them. Once they're gone, we don't care. That's up to somebody in the States. I can't be tracking. They know they report, somehow they report it back to the United States and they're looking for them. they never brought anybody back. I'm sure the guys went to jail or whatever if they caught them.
Yeah.
But we did have this was a very bizarre, like I said, being company clerk, there were so many things going on.
Yeah.
We had one bizarre thing. This one guy got, and usually these court cases for like court martialing and things like that were like in the future. You know, you didn't get like busted tonight and your court case is tomorrow. It might be like a month from now or something. Well, we had this one guy got busted for something, and he had his girlfriend back in the States, I guess, got pregnant while he was gone. So there's correspondence saying, you know, his girlfriend's pregnant, they want him to come home, get married to her, make it legit before she has a child. Okay.
Which is not his.
It's his.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. Supposedly.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, now there's a whole slew of different paperwork involved, right?
Yeah.
We got to go back. He has to say he's willing to marry her. She has to say she's willing. You need proof that she's pregnant. So remember, all the time travel for documentation is no fax machines.
Yeah.
So this is going on and on. Something else happens to this guy. Okay. So things are prolonged as far as this court case. Now, in the meantime, she has the kid. Okay. So now there's more paperwork proving she had the baby. Okay. So finally, the guy gets to go home and legitimize it, never comes back.
Mm.
So he was AWOL.
Speaking
So
of
just-
MASH, it reminds me of the one with the big beak from Toledo, the Section 8.
Jamie somebody. Yeah.
Klinger.
Jamie Farr.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about Section 8s?
Don't remember those.
Where they're finding a way to get kicked out.
No.
You never saw that?
No. And you know, the other thing, we were talking about the same thing. We had some type of CIA investigators always on premises, but we never really knew what, they never told you what they were there for. And you know, a lot of people think Vietnam was big drugs and things like that. I have to admit, and maybe I was naive, but I don't ever remember seeing anybody do drugs.
We haven't done that many in Vietnam, but the ones who I've talked to talked about it being like candy. It was just available, and it was a way of dealing with boredom and fear and any other thing.
Right.
But it was, you could get it anywhere. It was just easy to
Yeah,
come
so
by.
I
And,
remember. Like I said, obviously drinking, I mean, that was a big thing. And race,
CIA, you said it was,
I think it might have been
CIA?
some, but it could have been a military type of CIA, you know what I mean? Not the CIA that you
going
and I...
back to MASH, who was that? Is he a major? The quirky weirdo that comes in with all the
Yeah.
crazy stuff.
Is that Major Burns?
No, I'm thinking of this other guy that comes in every once in a while, and he's gonna find a bad guy somehow, and
Yeah. You know, you just knew there was some type of investigation going on, but you didn't know
yeah.
too much. You know, they never confided in you, so I didn't care. You just knew somebody was on the premises.
Was there a lot of men suffering psychologically? You didn't see any
No.
of that, huh?
And race relations, some of my best friends were black guys. So I didn't
You
have
know,
any
I've
issues.
seen that and heard that, and they would say the minute they got off the plane in the U.S., it was back to the old, the second they got off.
See,
It's amazing.
well, first of all, but it wasn't an experience because I didn't have any black friends before I went over there. You know, we lived in Warren. My
Yeah.
parents moved out of Detroit because the housing deteriorated and everything like that. And so you have to remember, when I went in the military, I didn't have any. In fact, there's one guy to this day, I wish I could track him down, was my best friend ever. I think he was either in I think he was in basic training. And, but in Vietnam, there was no issues. I mean, everybody, I got along with everybody. Now, maybe because of my position, they kind of needed me a little bit too. But it was funny. Some of the blacks, we used to have the old phonograph records, and when we were, a lot of times we were in base camp, they would put the records on, and the thing would play all night long while you're trying to sleep. And you just yell, can't wait to sleep. you know, but you did a lot of kind of, you
What
know,
were they playing, just songs?
I don't remember, to tell you the truth, whatever the music was, I don't know if it was Motown. back
Just
then or
songs
what.
of some kind.
Yeah, and then the other thing with the barracks, you know, I'm kind of jumping around here, so I hope you don't mind, but mosquitoes was a big thing, so you had
Yeah.
the mosquito nets, and then again with the rats, I never slept with my boots off, because if you had to get up in the middle of the night, you didn't know if there was something in your boot or anything. So when I went to bed, I was, in fact, I think most of the time I was fully dressed. Now, I did have a couple, and the movies, okay, I think I told you, there was a movie, a popular movie back then, I'm not sure how old you are, it was called Georgie Girl. I don't know if you remember that. Our whole extent of movies is in the compound, they would set up a screen outside, it wasn't very big, and then a little, like almost like an outhouse type thing for the projector to keep it, you know, from getting wet. And we all would go down there and sit on the ground, whether it was raining or no matter what, to watch this movie. And I would say you could almost count on all of a sudden there would be a raid, you know, the incoming mortars. So now you're, because you're assigned to a certain spot whenever there's, you know, sirens go off and that. So everybody had a certain place that they had to go to. So it was almost either it'd start raining or something would go on. It's kind of like, why are we even coming down here?
Right.
But that was the only source of entertainment,
Sure.
you know? And so what happened, you go to these different spots and then, you know, everything be all cleared. Well, again, if it's depending on the time, you know, you had to go back to your normal routine. So what happened? Oh, one night, in the middle of the night, we had a raid go off. And again, keep in mind, there's this compound, another company or unit across the street from us, and then the dirt road separating us, right? And 2 or 3 in the morning, all this gunfire's going off, you know, sirens going off. Oh my God, here we go again. You know, you go to your place. And then like an hour later, you know, the shooting's gone. We're all, you know, in formation to make sure everybody's there. Come to find out, some GI took his weapon, somehow got past the guard at the gate. I don't know how he did that. Got past the guard, was going up and down the road, shooting at both sides of the road, thinking that, you know, this guy went nuts, who knows, thinking it was the enemy. Well, now you got the American troops on the other side of the road shooting at him, and, you know, it's almost like you're shooting at each other, right?
Yeah.
The people that were doing the shooting. And then the guy, amazingly, doesn't get killed or anything, gets back to the gate. The only reason he stopped shooting is he ran out of ammunition. And so we, you know, and so you, as a typical 19-year-old, night ruined again, are just so mad. You wish you could just get your hands on this guy to beat the crap out of him because he just ruined your whole night.
Right.
And then we had another time during the middle of the day. You hear this shooting going on, and then there's this big commotion going on. Well, I don't know if you know what a water buffalo is, but it's basically the living for these mountain yard people are poles to plow, right?
Right.
Well, this water buffalo, we've come to discover, you know, the gates a lot of times during the day are open because, you know, trucks are coming and going and things like that. This water buffalo apparently snuck into the gate, and typical GI shot and killed it because it wouldn't stop. So now there's big commotion. The mountain yard guy, this is his whole life savings that you just killed. You know, we're all out there because, you know, there's usually not too much shooting going on during the day. Wonder what the heck's going on. And everybody's looking, you're an idiot. What'd you kill? Well, it wouldn't stop. Oh, okay, yeah, all right, that makes sense, you know. So little things, I mean, things like that. It's amazing how it is, you know, years later,
Yeah.
you think of
look at
those
it
things,
and
you know.
think it's kind of bizarre.
And then the other thing, remember these tall places for guard duty, okay? The mountain yard people had these little shacks. Well, the GIs, sometimes up in these guard duty towers, would shoot flares for the heck of it and set their shacks on fire for to get their kicks. Well, that didn't last too long because, you know, the company commander and everything, you know, I mean, these are friendlies we're talking about. So it got
Supposedly.
yeah, well, but I think they were in this
Yeah.
case. I mean, most of the time these mortar rounds you got were from a real far distance. I don't ever remember having any issues with people that lived locally, you know what I mean? And so they got to the point that says, boy, if you shoot a flare off or shoot your weapon off, there better be a dead Viet Cong laying on that wire in the morning. Because they had to put a stop to it.
Yeah.
And, you know, you got these young
Amazing.
GIs are just, you know, they're kids. They're just, you know, bored. So there was a lot of weird things. We had, and I brought some pictures in. I don't know if you want to incorporate it on the disc or not. But we did have, when I said USO shows, we never had any big people. We would have like maybe once or twice a year, these, I think they were from South Korea, coming, these bands, all-girl bands come in, which, you know, typical GIs would go nuts seeing something like that. But they would come into base camp. And so that was always kind of, you know, a source of entertainment. But you didn't, even though I was in base camp, it wasn't like every night you could go down. I don't first of all think that the club was open every night, but you just had so much going on, you couldn't go down there drinking every night. But I do remember one night, this is a little bit embarrassing, I remember one night, I told you I was real good friends with the mess sergeant who got up super early, okay? I remember one night laying in the compound with just my shorts on, and him walking by, going to start breakfast, right? And finding me there saying, what the hell are you doing out here? I don't know how I got out here, you know. I mean, like I said, I wasn't a big drinker, but, you know, and then after that, it scared the heck out of me. Because I could have been one of those nights where we had an alert.
Sure.
Or, you know, anything could have happened.
Incoming mortars?
Yeah. So after that, I think that was the only, I mean, I wasn't one to really tie one on. I guess I just had too much going on. I had to be on duty. I can't, you know, with my particular, you know, some of these guys didn't have a whole lot going on sometimes during the day. I for one, was working 7 days a week.
That probably saved you more often than
Right.
not, is how busy you were,
Right.
so boredom wasn't as
Right.
big a factor.
And plus, like I said, being married, I wasn't really enthralled about going into town and, you know, partying or anything. So I think there was a big, you know, some big things that fortunately were in my, and plus, you know, even back then, you know, I went to Catholic school. I tried to get, we usually had services, you know, periodically. I always try, you know, I had some pretty strong religious beliefs. And I think that kind of, you know, kept me focused.
Were those religious services routinely available to everybody at their own choice?
I don't remember. I don't remember if it was a generic or a priest. I don't remember back then. I just remember going to some type of service. I don't remember if I got communion back then being Catholic. I probably did. But I don't know if it was a once a week, once a month. The other thing, the government did do good, you know, the food was pretty bad in the kitchens. But, you know, that was the way it was. But they used to have a budget in the Army. It seems like this happened maybe every quarter or something, where they would bring in steaks. I mean, we're talking about great food for one day. You know, free pop, beer, whatever. It was really a feast. It was kind of like a reward for the troops. So that was, you know, kind of nice. Everybody looked forward to that. It was a morale booster. We used to have the Red Cross girls, okay, which we call them donut dollies.
Donut dollars?
Right, dollies.
Dollies.
Right.
I've never heard that.
And being the company clerk, I knew when they were coming in. And don't forget, a lot of times we had people still in base, you know, coming and going, right? So they would come on and sit up in the mess hall to kind of like be morale boosters, right? Donuts and whatever. And I got to watch how I phrase it. These girls were not very good looking. Okay.
Were they tend to be a little older than younger?
I don't remember.
Okay.
But they were not. And so even if it's Vietnam, you know, you would think any woman or girl, you know,
Would
guys,
be, right,
well, whenever the donut dollies were there, it was kind of like, oh my God, we got to go with the mess hall type thing, you know. And the first sergeant would say, okay, you got to get out in the barracks and get all these guys in here because you didn't want to hurt their feelings, right? So these guys would come in one door and go out the other. It was
Oh, that's amazing.
it was kind of embarrassing. I mean, I felt kind of sorry for the women.
yeah.
I mean, I'm just doing my, you know, I mean, I'm gathering them up. I can't make the guys sit there, right?
Right.
But, you know, they're supposed to be trying to socialize, just,
Yeah.
you know. So that was kind of funny.
When you haven't been with women for a long time, there aren't any ugly
Well, that
But
tells you
this-
how bad they were.
This, I mean, I went to school with principally all male in the northernmost western part of the UP. And when you don't see women for 3 months, they are all
Yeah.
queens
Yeah.
when you see one.
Yeah.
And then when you come back from being home once or twice a year, I thought she was beautiful. Oh my
Yeah.
God, I can't believe I
Yeah,
thought
yeah,
that.
Yeah, yeah.
I just can't imagine what they must have looked like to get that tan.
Yeah, yeah, it was,
Because, and it didn't take long, you know, you're talking about a month or two and
right.
you haven't seen women that all look like
And this
gorgeous.
was a couple times a year this would
Wow.
happen. So, we had as being a company clerk, it was pretty interesting in
Did he
that
tell
point.
you that story before?
You know, that's the first time
Really?
I've heard that. I don't
Surprised.
remember that one.
I'm not surprised. Of course, that's pretty good analysis.
Yeah.
It could have been the other way around, they
That's
were
right.
gorgeous.
Yeah. But the Korean band girls were pretty good looking. But
The Korean band.
the girls, you know, remember I told you about the Korean bands
Yes,
into
yes,
the club
yes,
once in a
yes,
while.
yes.
And he made sure he took pictures of that.
Yeah, I have some
Yeah,
pictures,
what'd
but
you
I
think
didn't.
about
Oh,
that?
they were beautiful.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, they were very pretty.
Well, you know, but anyways. So,
Hmm.
I'm trying to think what else I could, you know, jotted some notes about, going back to my first week there, you know, once I got to the Central Highlands and determined I'm going to be replacing somebody as company clerk, there was this one guy's name, I won't give you the last name, but his first name was John. And he was going home in about a week after, you know, I was there. And he got one of these Dear John letters from his, I think it was a girlfriend, I don't think it was his wife, while I was there. Now, you know, a Dear John letters, that's pretty common in any military. And I remember the last week that the guy was there. Now, I don't know if he did a lot of drinking while he was there or if the Dear John letter triggered it, but all I remember that he was drunk like 24 hours a day for the last week he was there after he got the letter. And I'm just thinking like, you know, I mean, I felt sorry for the guy. He lasted a whole year, and why couldn't this woman wait another week before she sent him the letter? What she get, you know?
Or even do it earlier instead of
Yeah.
right when he was
Yeah.
coming home.
Yeah, but it seemed like it was pretty common just talking to people, if I remember back then, that spouses and girlfriends just gave up on the guys over there, you know, and I think maybe that's a lot of reasons why the guys just, you know, felt, I don't know what the word is, but there was a lot of guys that did go to the town and, you know, be with the local women and things like that. And even when I would go to town once in a while and wait for, you know, a friend of mine, and, you know, he'd be socializing. I won't get into details, but it was pretty sad what, you know, what people would do just, you know, and but that's the way it was, you know.
Were there actual places to go to do?
Well, you just go down some alley and some
So there
girl
really wasn't any,
there was no
what do you call them?
bordellos or yeah, oh no, nothing like that.
No.
I mean, maybe if you were in Saigon or you gotta remember, well, in the middle of nowhere. Pleiku is
Yeah.
a complete.
Yeah.
It's like one of these small towns up in the thumb area, not, you know,
Yeah.
worst yet.
Yeah.
But you know, you go down some alley, some girl have little, you know, curtain pole across, little I remember waiting for my friend. There'd be a little like wash basin,
Oh,
a
really?
little cot there,
No
and
Huh.
he'd be in there for 10 minutes.
Jeez, oh,
You know,
man.
and okay, we're on our way. You know,
Mm,
good luck Monday morning. You know.
Jeez.
I'm sorry, I know I didn't tell you this stuff. But hopefully
I
it's...
figured it out myself.
But again, you know, I just didn't want to get involved with that stuff. You know.
Yeah,
But again, you can see if you don't think you're coming home and
Yeah.
you're 19 years old, you got to remember. We didn't really discuss, but the peak of Vietnam, there was what 600,000 GIs, and I mean, you look at what's over in Iraq and some of these other countries, you know, it's a pittance. You know,
Yeah.
60,000 people killed. What do we have in Iraq? A couple of thousand killed.
Yeah.
How many thousands injured? I mean, so it was a completely different world as far as U.S. presence.
Hmm. When you finally came home, what's the first things you need to attention?
When you get home, the most important thing in your life is the bathroom.
Hmm.
That was the greatest invention in the world. Because you got to remember over there, the facilities they had were, I mean, bad, really bad. The showers,
Really? That's
the
interesting.
showers where you had to go, you know, if you want to,
Yeah,
like I said, toilet paper, things, you know.
common areas really, just,
Oh, it'd be like maybe a room about the size of this table with, you know, little holes cut out. You just sat there, and then the Vietnamese or something, wherever had to clean up detail. You'd be sitting there sometimes and somebody'd be pulling the damn bucket out from underneath you while you're sitting there.
oh my God.
Or you go down there in the middle of the night, no lights. You don't even know, somebody's sitting next to you, you don't even know who the hell's sitting next to you.
Jeez.
So it was, I mean, and then the shower, yeah, we had sometimes...
Common area,
Yeah, big tank outside, you know, but a lot of times you'd be in there, all of a sudden the hot water run out. Then you'd be screaming, but at least you're in the shower.
yeah.
So you can see when I came home, the bathroom was probably the
Yeah.
biggest luxury, you know, that you could possibly have.
So did you buy a home right away, or did you?
No. Well, when we got home, I already had made up my mind that when I went in the service, I was working at Ford Motors on the assembly line and going to college part-time. But my heart wasn't in college, and I knew we were getting married, and, you know, being in the factory back then was a great job.
Yeah.
$3.50 an hour or whatever, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And but in Vietnam, I just said, I'm not doing this. I'm going back to school full time. Like I said, the military was really a wake-up call for me. And so when I got home, she was still living with her dad. You got to remember I'm going back. And she got pregnant when I was home on one of the leaves, which kind of changed the scenario. And her dad was very gracious. He said that we could wind up staying with him. But, you know, I'm a typical male, you know, I mean, I'm really like a newlywed. Think about it. I mean, we got married and 2 months later I'm in Vietnam. So people say, well, you're 19 when you got married. I said, yeah, but I really don't feel I was married till I was 21. Because the first couple of years of my life, I didn't really see her that much. So, you know, he said, well, you can stay here, and I made it very generous. You pay the utilities or something, and that's all, you know, save all kinds of money. And I just said, you know what, we're married. I said, you know, we didn't get married to live with parents.
Right.
So we wound up getting an apartment. I think her dad was a little bit upset with me for a while because, you know, I wasn't taking advantage of the thing, but I went back to school, and we survived on...
Where'd you go to school?
I wound up going to Macomb College for 2 years, and then I transferred to Wayne and got a bachelor's degree in accounting.
Oh, really?
So it was very...
So what'd you do with that?
I worked for a lot of places, Ford Motor, Allied Signal, Crane Communications was my last job.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I did well. Crane was a very good family to me, family owned, nice benefits as far as profit sharing, things like that. Stayed there about 20 years and retired. retired at 55. Retiring early was a couple things, still have health issues and...
Still carry over health issues, eh?
Yeah, it changed. I went from, I know we haven't talked too much about that, but I had the ulcerative colitis for like 5 years from the time it initiated, and it switched over to rheumatoid arthritis. And there's a whole story, if we have time, if you want, we can discuss the whole VA system. But
Yeah.
what happened is the colitis basically went away, went dormant on me, and the rheumatoid arthritis took over.
Hmm.
And it got pretty severe. I mean, over the years, I've had 3 hip replacements,
Oh, my goodness.
rotary cup surgery, major hand fused, thumb fused, metal plate. So the arthritis has actually been more wicked to me than the colitis was. And
And how long did you get
I've had the arthritis.
paid for disability?
Okay, what happened is, okay, so, well, we'll get back to that in a second.
Okay.
Just so the arthritis basically took over in say '73, and I've had that today.
Hmm.
So I've had that, and this has been the key person.
Well, like I said, the late 20s, he was diagnosed with real severe rheumatoid arthritis, and that was a crushing blow to him as far as his health goes. That was probably more devastating than the ulcerative colitis. And you know, he tried submitting something to the VA, you know, to receive more potential benefits, but that didn't pan out now.
But she's, yeah, but what I'm getting at is she's
I know.
been there. She does everything.
No,
Hmm.
I don't. You're the main person.
Well, that's,
So we won't go
you're
too much
very
into that.
fortunate with
That's what I've been very
a
fortunate.
mate that'll step in and help you out in some difficult,
He would do it for me too.
that's tough.
If it was reversed.
How did that affect your family now?
My kids have been very supportive.
They
You know,
How many kids you?
We have 3
Two?
kids. 3 kids, 2
Two?
girls. Yeah,
Three?
3. 2 girls and a boy. The girls are like in their early 40s. My son's
Mhm.
like 37, 36. But that was the real difficulty was more maybe with my son than the girls, because you know when you have a boy, you want to play the sports.
Yeah.
And doing anything, even though I could do some of the things, just it was pretty difficult throwing a ball and things like that. And he never
He never complained.
complained.
Hmm.
But, so the arthritis kind of took over my life. But fortunately, you know, again, you know, God took care of us, and
Well, with all the limitations that you've had, you've done pretty well
right,
with being able to be successfully employed and,
right.
We've had a blessed life.
Yeah.
And the companies have been very supportive. At Crane, I had, you know, the hip surgeries, you know, for time off and things like that. I've been very blessed. No matter what company I went for, if I needed any time off with the arthritis, you know, they've been very supportive, and so I think that's helpful.
how are you now
That was
comparatively?
well, I can't do a lot of things, you know, like,
Oh.
it's, you know, just little things like taking the garbage out, you know, carrying groceries.
You're getting old.
Well, yeah.
None of us can do what we
Yeah,
used to
but
do.
I have a lot of deformity in my hands, and so I do see an acupuncture. I've had a lot of still pain in the other shoulder. And how are we doing for time?
We're getting close.
Okay.
Getting close this way.
We have to put another disc in if we go
Oh,
further, so.
okay, it's your call.
So we have our next
Yes.
interview.
Oh, we have another one, but
Okay.
you
It's
can
nice.
certainly come back and we can talk about some of those issues you had with the,
VA and that.
yeah.
It's your call. I mean, I don't mind coming back if you guys want to do another session.
That's up to you, we can schedule.
What do you
one.
think?
It's your call.
Yeah, is your schedule pretty flexible?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think we got a lot of things
Okay,
that we could still talk about. Like I said, I made some notes, and maybe you'll come up with a couple other things yourself.
Actually, we're doing another interview on Thursday, this Thursday here, if you can come then, or else,
I'd have to check my schedule at home,
yeah.
because like I said,
Okay, we can look at it, sure.
I mean, if you can give us a week we can
Oh, yeah,
get around
yeah.
it, because this is available to us.
Now, are we gonna, I know, Ann, you said we're gonna have a copy of this
Yeah,
disc? Okay.
uh-huh.
Does this get edited at all?
No.
Okay. And how about these pictures? Do you
Let's
just
see
pick what you
those.
want? Well, they're on a disc. I hope you guys can,
Oh, we'd
I
have
didn't
to
think- oh.
look at
Yeah.
those and,
I didn't know if you can incorporate them in the video at all.
Gary,
Let's
see.
draw this to a close.
Okay.
And then we'll move it, okay?
Okay.
well,
Okay. So I guess we're following up with where we left off a couple
Right,
days
the
ago.
continuation of our interview of Monday.
Okay, and what I did is I brought some pictures in from Vietnam. Hopefully the quality's not too bad. I just thought photography wasn't a big deal back then, so maybe just kind of explain a little bit. This basically is taken from our base camp. I think if you looked in the distance, probably here you can see the Air Force Base that I referenced in the previous interview. They were maybe like 4 or 5 miles away. So
And what's that city in the background?
there is no city.
Oh, so what
That's-
are those 12 things?
Those real tall things is the Air Force Base. They're towers
okay,
and
big
everything.
towers.
Yes,
Gotcha.
yes. Okay. So, and so like I said,
And which base was this?
I don't even remember, but
Okay.
I had no idea. This one here, this is basically, we talked about the Vietnamese women. This woman, even, I don't even remember her name, unfortunately. We just called them baby sons because she wasn't married. She basically, I remember her coming in, doing laundry. Very nice person. Was one of those things, again, unfortunately, nowadays you probably would keep in touch, but under the circumstances, it didn't happen. This next one here, I think this picture, when I did the picture, I put it in backwards because the writing in the background, I think, should be the opposite way. So I apologize for that, but it's basically some of the vehicles that, it's kind of like a taxi cab. I rode in those a couple of times. You just sit in the back and that's it. So it's probably their big transportation back then.
Are they little three-wheel vehicles?
Yes, exactly. And price-wise, I had no idea what they charged, I didn't use that very often. I probably just used it if I couldn't get a ride into town or something. Somehow I was able to get that. Now this, I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I want to say that was one. In my other interview, I mentioned that I got medevaced the first month I was there, and I want to say that that was the type of plane that I flew from one city in Vietnam to another, but my memory doesn't serve me good on that, or if that was something else. But there was a real small, quick story I will tell you about that. When I got medevaced, that we were on this plane, no windows or anything, and like 20 minutes, half hour later, this thing's vibrating and everything like that, and so all of a sudden the engine shut down, and I said, "Oh, we're here," and the guy next to me kind of laughs, and he says, "No, we've just been taxiing for the last half hour." But with no windows or just the vibration of this plane, I had no clue, that we had never even left yet, so that was kind of funny.
Just refresh my memory, why were you medevaced the first
I
time?
had also took colitis
Okay, so
right
that
off,
was-
within a month after I was in
Okay,
Vietnam.
and you didn't have that before, it was
No,
after you got
no,
there?
right,
Okay,
exactly.
so picked up some kind of a bug and
Right.
stress and stuff like that, sure.
Okay, now this was just kind of like a vendor in Vietnam. I'm not even sure what the heck he's got on that cart, but it was just a picture that I had taken. I'm sure he's selling something. This was taken in Pleiku, the only city basically near us. And I can't really describe population-wise. Probably would be like some small town up north, not real big.
Any idea on how you spell Pleiku?
Pleiku, I believe.
Okay.
Okay. And then this was another. This is me. I don't remember having civilian clothes, but I guess I did have something back then. And this picture here basically is a rickshaw. Again, another means of transportation. I don't personally remember. I think I just jumped in this thing for a photo op. I don't remember ever using that. Again, I wasn't in town that long, so it's not like I needed to get around. this guy here, I think this is one of the Mountain Yard people that I referred to earlier, but I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's what they looked like back then. And like I mentioned earlier, most of the Mountain Yard people were farmer type people compared to what we have now. This guy almost looks like, if you look closely, like he's lost an arm, if you look at his shirt.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't say for sure. Again, you know, you're just taking...
And that looks like, that almost looks like a shirt that was from the military.
It could be, but I can't, like I said, I mean, this guy looks pretty old to be in the military.
Oh, maybe you just acquired
Yeah,
something.
you know, a lot of that stuff
Yeah,
just
okay.
moved around.
Yeah, soldiers would give things away and,
Because here's a picture of their military, okay, in town,
Yeah.
and you can see they have nice uniforms, at least, you know, at that point there. But- So again, these last couple pictures are in the city of Playcool, or town of Playcool. Okay, then here, this is me in base camp in the early stages when I had guard duty. Okay, and
we are getting quite a bit of,
are you getting a lot of glare? Any way to turn it, or?
Does it help if it's up on the?
that's a little better.
Okay, I'll try to remind me when I flip that around.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so that's when I was on guard duty. I think the first few months I was on there, and then my job, I don't remember being on guard duty for 11 months. It seems like as time went by, I was just so involved with everything else I
Yeah.
had to do that the captain and
Yeah.
top and those guys just basically said, you know, he's not doing guard duty anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Because you were the company clerk.
Yes,
in
exactly,
Okay.
right. And this is another picture of me in town with a couple of Vietnamese kids. Okay.
Just a minute.
I should have kept them in order for you. I didn't realize.
That's
I wanted to
okay.
go through them all.
That's all right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so like I said, these were a couple of kids back then. This, I mentioned to you, we did have, it wasn't an official USO show. It was more, I don't know who was responsible for bringing in these Korean bands, but I seem to remember we did have like a club on base that seemed like at least several times we had different types of entertainment come in, and if you had the opportunity to go down there, fine. And I think it was for non-commissioned type people. I don't even remember what the officers had, to tell you the truth. Maybe they were in the same place, because I can't believe we had two different facilities. I don't remember anything separate for the officers.
And the mini skirt and the go-go boots.
Yeah, right. You can see that was
Yeah.
a big thing back then.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this one here, this is when I was in Hawaii. Okay. I met my wife there in October after about 10 months, taken from the room. It looks like in this picture I was at E4 at this time. So I think I didn't get my promotion to E5. I might have even got that once I got medevaced from Vietnam, that were the last month I was there or something, because looking at, this was considered a specialist, you know, that was my MOS, and that's my bachelor, so I obviously was E4 there.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent a week in Hawaii with my wife. And this is when I came home, first Christmas back from Vietnam. Can you see that picture all right? And if you notice, the patch on this one now is the E5 patch. If you notice a little bar over the specialist patch. So I must have had the promotion, like I said, probably just before I left. And this is in my, I think this is in my mother's basement. I can't tell for sure.
What year would this have been?
This would have been 1967, December of 67. So you can
What was your wife's name again?
Christine,
Christine.
right? And if you looked at me in those pictures, I mean, I was pretty frail back then. I had lost a lot of weight. I think I was like 130 pounds or something like that. So pretty different from when I went into the service. Then this one here, this is with my mom. who fortunately is still alive. And this was taken up in the thumb area at my my grandmother's house, which always had family up there for the holidays. So that's would be 67 again, Christmas. And then this one here, this is a picture of my two cousins, the brothers, first cousins. One was in the Navy and one was in the Marines. Again, this was at Christmas time. They were actually only a couple of my relatives that were in the service at that time. And I think both of these fellows enlisted. And I think the one that was in the Marines, unfortunately, he's in California now, so the only thing I do with him is a Christmas card. But I thought somebody told me at one time that he was some type of honor guard in Washington, D.C., but I can't say for sure.
Possible. Yeah.
Now, his brother, unfortunately, the one in the Navy, he wound up getting sugar diabetes and died at a very young age. He got released from the service, and it was pretty tragic. He wound up, I think, over the years, lost his legs from the diabetes, and it was really a tragedy. And I think part of the thing, too, was his dad died of sugar diabetes at a young age. So it's...
And what were their names?
It's Wayne is on the left, the right of this picture, and Gary would be on the left.
Gary.
Okay, and it looks like almost that the uniforms I was just the opposite. It looks like Wayne is the Navy and Gary is the Marine, but I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know their uniforms that much.
And these are
First cousins.
first cousins?
Yes. Okay, this thing here I'm pretty proud of. I got the Army Commendation Medal for meritorious service in Vietnam, and I didn't really think I was going to get it. The captain had talked about it as I was winding down my tour. I wound up getting medevaced, never saw him again, and it was quite a pleasant surprise, months later when I received it in the mail and that from the government. I did a little research. I don't know if this is true. Just recently, even though my family was really nice, it's in a beautiful frame that they got me because they never know what to buy me for the Christmas and Father's Day. So it was one of those pleasant surprises. Just kind of like sat around for years. So it's now hanging in the office area. But I did a little research, and I don't know if this is true, but it said that this particular medal is one step down below the Bronze Star, which kind of impressed me, to tell you the truth.
I think that's correct. And was it just for general service that you
Right.
you did?
Yeah, they call it like meritorious service as
Okay.
opposed to a battle type,
Okay.
like the
Yeah,
Navy Cross or,
yeah. Just you were, obviously, you were
Right.
just indispensable to him.
Right,
So.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
So this
Wonderful.
this was nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Okay, here's another picture. This is in town again, the shopping. And these are kind of like the Vietnamese women, some of the outfits that they wore. So they did have some pretty nice dresses, I mean, it wasn't all, most of the time you saw them with the black, but, and they almost always wore the hats.
Did you buy any blouses or any scarves or anything for your wife?
One time, this was a very interesting story. One time I was in town and I was going to buy her one of these like robes, I forget
Yeah.
what they were, what they're called back then over there. And I was just kind of like goofing around with it. I didn't have a lot of money. I forget what the guy wanted for it, and I kind of like took off my fatigue jacket and I says, "I'll trade you this for the outfit." And I was just kind of goofing, and the guy right away wanted to do it. So him and I got kind of like a scuffle, nothing major, but because I realized, wait a minute, I better not be doing this, And I can't remember if I wound up paying him the money that he wanted for it or not, but it's funny how you remember something like that. But I can't remember because it was very difficult to ship anything.
Yeah.
Letters, I'd have to ask my wife if I ever sent her anything, but it seems like all I ever got out of there was letters.
Okay.
Okay, so this next one, I think, this one here is again with me on guard duty, but this one's kind of interesting because this is basically our barracks, but if you look in the distance, and hopefully you can see that good with you can see the water tower for showers that I talked about. And if you look closely, I think you can see the little barrel on top that had the water. and then the steeple is for heating the water up. So basically, that's where you wind up going for your showers. Again, another one, real quick here, I'll try to flip through some of these that are basically redundant. That's, again, the shopping area. Okay, this one here, this is taken from our base camp looking across the street, so you can see the road. You can see some of these low-light type bunkers that we had for guard duty up front. And we discussed that earlier in the video, but that unit across the street was basically another company. Okay, and then you can see the road separating us. And that's the road I think I indicated in an earlier video that one night the guy just kind of went nuts shooting up and down, walking up and down, just lost it, I guess. Okay, this is again, you know, that's just a couple of the people in town. Okay, this one again, the road across, and you can see we're on pretty flat ground, and you can see the mountain in the distance. It took a while to get basically out of our area before you saw any higher terrain, which I guess was good because I told you we received a lot of incoming mortar round. So, you know, I think that probably was a benefit.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, this almost looks like one of the ones I showed you earlier in the town. Just yell, and if I'm going too fast.
No, you're fine.
Okay, this was basically the building that I worked in. You can see all the postings on the bulletin board. I'm sure there was all kinds of notices to the people. So I think I might be a PFC. That might be in my early days. I think I was just a PFC there. So that would have probably been the first couple of months in Vietnam. And if you look, I think I look a lot healthier
You do.
than
I
I
was
did.
going to
in,
say you look a lot healthier
Right.
than you
yes.
you did later on.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then this is a little bit different picture of the people. I don't know what these guys were.
Could we just back a second?
Sure.
You see the dogs lying there.
Yes.
Were they just stray, or were they kind of like
You know
company
what?
mascots? Or
I don't even remember because when I looked at this picture, I said to myself, I don't remember any dogs. So
Okay.
if there were, I didn't deal with. You know, they weren't
Okay.
any
They weren't
friends
like,
of mine.
They weren't like
They might have-
unit mascots or anything
No,
like
no,
that.
we didn't have like you see nowadays that
Yeah.
I remember. But maybe some of the guys took
Okay.
them on.
Well, I was in Thailand. I remember we had stray dogs that wandered onto the base, and the shop that I worked in, we had one that stayed with us. That was just a stray dog that walked
could've
in
been.
one day.
Now this is another picture of the people in town. Now these guys are not people in uniform. I don't know who they were, but they look a little not your normal people that you're looking at. You know what I mean? Kind of like
Yeah.
they look almost like a different type of clientele there. But again, I'm just snapping these pictures. I have no idea back then. I'm not dealing with these people. It's more like souvenir type pictures. This is where I slept. I always had the top bunk, and you can see the one underneath me has the net, for the mosquitoes and things like that. So, and again, I think this one here, I am a specialist, so this is probably somewhere midway through my tour. Okay. This is a pretty good shot. It's a little bit closer up, but if you're talking health-wise, this would
Turn
definitely
it,
been there.
there.
That was,
And then you can see the barracks and the dumpsters for stuff in the background, things like that. So, this is in town. Basically, you can see, this is their living conditions. I mean, there's somebody with looked like their kids and laundry hanging out. I mean, the towns. A lot of dead animals laying in the road. I remember when we first got there, I told you our first night, it just seemed like the animal, there was no like trash pickup. It looked like, if they did, it was very infrequent. Here's another picture in town. This one's kind of redundant. So that's kind of the pictures.
did you have these pictures developed while you were in Vietnam, or did you send the rolls back home?
Back then, I think the big thing, my wife and I took tons of slides, I remember.
Yeah.
So these probably were all slides, which were, I probably just kept I don't remember. Again, if my wife was here, I could ask her if she remember if I send them home to her. Obviously, it might even just been one roll of film over a period of time. But I know I did get them developed over there.
Okay.
And it seems like I would have sent them home because, again, when I got medevaced, I never got back to get my personal stuff, and I'm not sure, they probably just took some quick stuff of mine.
Right.
You know, you didn't have a lot of belongings
Yeah,
anyways.
right, you just-
And I don't think I would have had film sitting there.
Okay.
And if you notice, there's not any pictures, it seems like later, it seems like these were all the early stages.
Yeah.
So you want me to put this
Was
on?
this a camera that you brought with you?
I'm sure I did.
It must have
Yeah, it
been.
probably was one of those little Kodak where you take slides. I don't know if you remember what the slides were,
Yeah.
the big deal.
Yeah.
My wife and I took it. So, unless you have any questions, Ann, we could talk a little bit about a couple other things, and then
Yeah.
Dennis wants to
Yeah.
wrap this up. One thing I did make a note of, I thought it was pretty interesting, is the pay scale back then. And I did find that a few of my records, in the beginning, when I first got drafted, it was $88 a month. Okay? And then when I went to the combat zone, and I think like in the combat zone, I thought it was another $50 you got for being in a combat zone. And I remember once in Vietnam, everything was tax-free. You didn't have to pay any income tax. Now, when I got out, I was an E5, which is the equivalent either to a sergeant or a specialist 5. My pay was around $200 a month. And I remember my wife was getting, I think it was $55 because I was married. So I don't know if she was getting the $55 the whole time, or if she got more money after I got the promotions. I think it was just a flat fee. And then the life insurance, nowadays I think these guys get like a couple $100,000. It was $10,000 back then.
Yeah.
That's all they gave you. So, which is pretty pathetic.
Was this Army or Air Force?
This is Army.
Army.
And I remember even in Vietnam, I had most of my money going home. It might seem kind of funny, you're getting $100 a month, but I had nothing to spend it on. You know, government was paying for everything, and I
You
had
got a wife at home.
I had like a payroll deduction. So I always was kind of like a kid, like, hey, I'm getting tax free. I mean, you know, back then it was like, you know,
Yeah.
it wasn't all that bad, I
Right.
guess. Okay, so let's talk about the VA a little bit. My experiences with them. When it came time for me to get out of the Army,
Now, let me just
Okay,
let me
go on, I'm
refresh.
sorry.
You came down with ulcerative colitis.
right,
And it basically plagued you the whole time that you were
right,
there.
exactly.
And you were medevaced once, twice?
Twice, well, once in country and once back to the States.
Okay. And you actually wound up leaving Vietnam a little before your...
Yes, about a
your-
month, about a
okay,
month.
because you were so sick.
Right,
And then you came home and you were so sick that they sent you off to another hospital.
right,
Is that
right,
correct?
for
Yeah.
about 5 months.
For 5 months, and that was in California? And you
No,
went-
that was in Kentucky,
Oh,
Fort
and
Knox.
you were in Kentucky?
Yes,
And your wife was still up here?
right.
Okay.
And they did let me come home a couple of times on like a couple
Okay.
weeks leave. things
Because
like
you
that.
were really in very debilitated
Right,
shape?
right,
Okay.
exactly. And it wasn't something like I could come home and just get discharged. I mean, they really
Right.
had to
Right.
keep an eye on me, I guess.
Right, right. Well, at least it was on their dime.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So when it came time to discharging, you did get a whole lot of advice, but basically when the person was telling me what my options were, and at that time you just want to get out. You know, you're not thinking, you know, they're asking, are you going to be, were you planning to be a career soldier or things like that? And no, I wasn't. So this is kind of strange because they said, well, you can go on temporary disability with the Army, or you can go with the VA. And I says, well, what's the difference? And they says, well, money-wise, it's the same thing. Okay, I was getting 30% back then, or about $100 and something bucks a month. And I didn't get anything for my wife because 30% we didn't get anything for a spouse. Okay, maybe you'd have to be 50%. So, but the person did point out to me, he says a couple of things. He says, first of all, he got into a little bit on the medical care aspect, not a whole lot, But the key thing, he says, if you go with the Army, you're only on temporary disability for 5 years, and then you're rated permanent if I still have this condition. Okay? Because this wasn't a battle where I lost an arm or leg or something where it's going to heal back. Okay? So with the colitis, they're probably thinking maybe in 5 years I'll be okay.
Right.
So, or you can go with the VA, but the VA is 10 years. I said, well, that don't make any sense. I says, and then he said, every year you're going to be going for physicals. They're going to want to re-examine you. I said, why do I want to do this? So I said, I'll take the 5 years. 5 years, if I still have it, I'm rated permanent, and I don't have to worry about year number 7, you know.
Yeah.
And plus, just the it was a big aggravation every year going for, you know, they want you to take a physical and make sure you still have this situation. So I went with the Army. Then, so, you know, that went on for 4 or 5 years. And then around 1973, my colitis pretty much dissipated, you know, went dormant on me. I wasn't having a lot of medical issues. But I got rheumatoid arthritis real bad, okay, out of nowhere. So I'm going to all kinds of doctors, being treated, and it was pretty severe. I wound up missing some time from work, not a lot, but again, my employer was, you know, kind. And so I said, you know, I'm going to go back to the VA and say, wait a minute, nobody in my family ever had rheumatoid arthritis or colitis, and I think there's some correlation. So I go to Allen Park back then. I don't know if the board's even there anymore, but it was an old hospital, and spent the whole day there with these doctors who were way past their retirement. I mean, these guys, they were pretty pathetic. Okay, I get all this information from these other doctors saying I have rheumatoid arthritis real bad. I get to the end of the day, and these doctors are like, you don't have arthritis. There's nothing wrong with you. I was furious. My wife, I don't know if she had gone with me or not at that point. Either when I got downstairs or when I saw her, I says, you never put me in a VA hospital. I says, get me out of here. I see these guys are, I'll watch my language, I'll just say idiots, okay? I says, they're saying I don't even have arthritis. Now, they didn't tell me you have a right to appeal or anything like that. I just wanted to get out there and have nothing to do with them. Well, time went on. My arthritis got really bad. I think I might have mentioned earlier, I've had 3 hip replacements on both, 2 on one side, and all kinds of other issues. And I says, you know what? And I'm talking to some of these doctors and doing a lot of reading, and they said there's a correlation that, like, the colitis and arthritis are almost like cousins. Okay, so I went to one of these VA health centers that they have. I think they have in Macomb, and I went to one in Port Huron and spent several days there. And they said, "Oh yeah, you know, let's do an appeal. You know, you have a right. You know, you should be getting more than 30%. Arthritis is causing you more problems than everything." So with the bottom line, I went through all this. They get me set up to go downtown to the new VA hospital for, you know, this arthritis. I get there, I spend half a day there. They come out, we want to do a colonoscopy on you. Now, I've had a number of colonoscopies. That's what you need when you have the colitis. Okay, that's a way to check, make sure you don't have cancer or anything serious. So I says, a colonoscopy, I'm here for my arthritis. Yeah, but aren't you here to try to get more money for your colitis? I says, no. I says, I'm not going to do a colonoscopy. Why do I want to go through that? And they kind of, well, they said, then you got to redo all the paperwork and come back another time, and we'll have to review you for arthritis. We can't do anything for you while you're here. So I go back to Port Huron, some more paperwork, reschedule months later again. I go down there. Again, I've got all, not, unfortunately, and I've been seeing some real specialists in that and for arthritis. None of them would ever, even though they would admit verbally that they thought they were a correlation, none of them would put anything in writing because it's one of these things that's not 100% factual. You know, they can't prove it. So I go back there, Another day, oh yeah, you got arthritis, but you know what? Sorry, there's no correlation. We can't do anything for you. So after that, I basically have had it with the VA. Now, the one thing nice with me going with the Army, which was really beneficial over the years, I have what's called TRICARE. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, where they basically pay secondary to your other medical. So, whereas the VA isn't that way. So, especially now that I'm on Medicare, TRICARE pays for anything that Medicare doesn't pay, as long as Medicare covers it.
Right.
So like my prescription coverage, and that is excellent. I don't have to deal with VA or anything. So the bottom line, I guess, is what I'm saying. I did make the right decision in going with the Army, okay, but I really sure didn't get a lot of, advice on what to do, especially now that medical is so darn expensive, okay? Now, the other thing, it wasn't 100% true after this bout with going to VA. This was about maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I wound up with this appeal again. And I did discover that VA actually does pay about $20 more a month than the Army. So I could have been getting more money for the last 30-something years. So I said, well, so what I did is I basically switched. Now the VA is paying me versus the Army. I'm getting a couple $100 more a year from that. But if you figure it out over 30 years, I probably lost quite a bit of money. So that's my story with the VA.
It's such a labyrinth. You don't know what to do. We've had a couple of veterans who've come in, and one or two of them have become advocates. They kind of specialize in helping somebody go through and apply for their benefits, and and I remember one guy, he just read all the rules, and he knows that something has to be, they have to make a decision on, day 60, so on day 59, he's calling them up and says, you're going to have this decision tomorrow because this is rule such and such, right? And, yeah, that kind of thing.
Well, and that's what, these two agencies, these various agencies of the state of Michigan, I mean, these people seem to know what they were doing. They seem to think, they did all the paperwork for me for the appeal, second appeal, and, they were there, but nothing ever happened, so. Yeah. So that's my story.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems like in your case, they haven't been able to really establish the relationship between although medically it makes sense until there's, the study that shows it, they won't do it. So, but how are you feeling now?
Oh, I still have the arthritis issues. Fortunately, the colitis is still dormant, which I'm not getting a double whammy here.
Yeah.
That's good.
But like I said earlier, my wife's not here. She does. She's a saint. So.
Do you think that? Do you think it was stress in Vietnam that triggered all this?
Yes, I think that was it. And then the food, because remember when I told you I came home, they told me I should have. And you got to remember the water over there. Who knows what you're drinking?
Yeah.
But I would say it was the stress. I mean, it was. I mean, even though I wasn't in combat, you were in combat, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially when you're 19 years old and you see all this stuff going on around you.
Yeah, and as a company clerk, you had kind of a lot of responsibility, and you saw.
In fact, I probably was working seriously 7 days a week because you had everything going on, with the sergeant top or the captain or second lieutenant one, that's something you had to be in there. I mean,
that's a lot to put on a 19-year-old.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, very responsible.
Right.
Yeah.
And plus you saw these other guys that were going through stuff that, you felt sorry for them. And
you don't think that you were exposed to Agent Orange or anything?
That was the other thing, because I thought, well, maybe with the arthritis and that. And supposedly the government looks where you're stationed. It says we weren't spraying for Agent Orange there. So what are you going to do if that's what their criteria is?
Right. Yeah. You wouldn't know if you had food or something that had been sprayed with it, or came in contact with it someplace else. But are there? I don't know a whole lot. Is arthritis and colitis? Is that?
I didn't see that as a symptom of Agent Orange. Right. But you know,
Doesn't mean there wasn't something
Right.
else, or some other kind
Right.
of virus or something
Right.
that, yeah.
But the bottom line, I mean, overall, let's say with the Army, I mean, it did change my attitude as far as going back to school. I mean, I think there was a lot of pluses, and I have changed my attitude over, and I probably would do the same. You know, a lot of people are going to Canada and things like that. I probably would, I don't know if I could say because my health-wise, but, I had no reservations about serving my country. Now I'm having reservations when you see all these other conflicts because you look back and say, hey, was Vietnam one of these things that the politicians got us into, and another tragedy. So I'm not a hawk anymore when it comes to conflicts.
Yeah,
But I am definitely supportive of the military.
yes, yeah.
And the other thing along the same lines, I'm not supportive of all the spending. When you see all these boondoggle projects that they got out there for spending, it makes no sense. It's all
Well, especially when they cut back on stuff for the guys coming back from
right.
military. You read some of that stuff of them cutting back their benefits and services and stuff like that, and you just
All the difficulties the VA and the VA hospitals have had trying to take care of these wounded
Right.
soldiers.
right.
Well, here's the problem with they built that new VA hospital downtown. You got Harper Hospital and all those other places next door. They could have saved all that money and just told the vets, go to these other institutions and we'll reimburse you. No, it was some politician that had to go for the city of Detroit and say, hey, we're going to get all these contracts for your city, and
Yeah.
the senators or whatever, it's a feather in their
I
cap.
think pretty much all the VA hospitals are pretty independent of any civilian hospital.
Right, but they don't. What I'm saying is they don't
Yeah.
need the VA
They-
hospitals.
They
Yeah,
got a lot of them.
Right.
yeah,
You should see the one in Ann Arbor. It's huge.
yeah. But, well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate. It's an honor to be able to tell my story.
Oh, it was an honor to have you. And thank you very much for the pictures of quite in addition to
Glad.
the story. So, thanks again.
Okay.
Okay.